Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, back in our Cincinnati studio. Today, talking all things AFC and NFC West. It's our final preview here, Sam.
Yep, with freshly dimmed wall lights, so it should look a little better even than before.
Yeah,
Not quite as
previously, we did have a little extra brightness on the back here. We had some reflection, so I think it's better. Let us know. Hashtag let us know.
Now it should be just pure white light shining and reflecting off my bald head as opposed to the blue light from the wall.
Instead of the blue, which was very distracting. We've already previewed 3/4 of the league. We've gone division by division, 2 divisions per show, and this is our final one, AFC and NFC West. And then tonight, we start a full weekend of preseason action.
Nice.
Football.
We got
full football.
Well, I mean, look, there's week 1 of preseason, but clearly the thing that everyone's going to be focusing on is the start of Shedeur Sanders. Getting
Friday
the start.
Night. Yeah, Shedeur. I mean,
the much coveted start.
Whatever happens Friday night is going to determine the entire path and trajectory of his career.
Now, is he starting just because he's the only quarterback left available to them?
Nah, he's earned it.
Who said? Who
Fully
could say?
Earned. So we will, listen, we're not, shameless here. We will fully react to everything Shedeur does Friday night.
Clearly, the takes the following day are going to be ridiculous. However, it is interesting. I mean, he's going to be getting, I would say, the majority of that game because, like I said, the only 2 available quarterbacks. Obviously, like Flacco, they're resting because he's 100 years old and he's probably going to start week 1. They don't want him to start playing, week 1 of the preseason. They're holding out Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel because each of them, I think, has a hamstring injury, which means literally the only quarterback in the room available to them was Shedeur Sanders. They've subsequently signed Tyler Huntley, but he signed like a day or 2 ago, so, they have to get him up to speed quickly. So, genuinely, Shedeur is probably going to play, I would say, most of that game.
That's what we're looking forward to. That's what preseason's all about. So we'll be here on Check the Mic, reacting live. So again, we appreciate all the new subscribers. We continue to grow, which is awesome. Less than a year in here, Sam, and continue to subscribe because we'll be going live at whenever it's needed throughout the entire preseason. All right, man, you ready to go?
Yep.
All right, division by division, we are on to the AFC West, and we're going to start with the Kansas City Chiefs, defending AFC champions, Super Bowl champions in 2 out of the last 3 seasons. The Chiefs were 15-2 last year, 15-1. While Patrick Mahomes was the starting quarterback, and then, of course, go on to their 3rd straight Super Bowl, getting, kind of waxed in the Super Bowl by the Philadelphia Eagles. Chiefs over-under is 11.5. That's right up there with the Bills, Ravens, best teams in the NFL as far as over-under for this season. From our friends over at FanDuel with the dimmed, nicely showing FanDuel.
Yeah, with the well-exposed logo now. Neon sign on the wall.
Not reflecting
Beautiful.
on your head.
Not reflecting.
All right, thoughts on the Chiefs here this season, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird season last year to kind of to get takeaways from because their regular season record was spectacular. On the other hand, people spent the entire regular season waiting for the wheels to fall off. Like, I can't remember exactly what week it was, but I remember distinctly sometime around Christmas maybe, they were playing one of those, ridiculous island games, on a random day during the week. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is on there saying, like, this can't continue. This is ridiculous. The wheels are about to come off. There's no way they can keep winning these games playing the way they're playing. And then they did seem to get it all together in the playoffs through the postseason, only to subsequently, as you said, get waxed in the Super Bowl spectacularly. So it's difficult to kind of get a true handle on what exactly this team was, even before you get to off-season work and additions and subtractions and all that kind of thing. I think ultimately, though, they've earned the kind of leeway where you say, however you want to characterize it, whether it's like sandbagging the regular season or simply not being that bothered about the regular season, they have shown the ability to get it together for the playoffs, even if it ultimately culminates in getting waxed in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and there's also this idea of, late game magic from Mahomes and late game magic from Spags defensively. Like they've earned that right. Just to remind what happened last year, I used to always describe them way back last year, calibrated to win by 3. No matter what happens, they found a way to win by 3. That included a blocked game-winning field goal from the Denver Broncos or the Raiders just dropping a snap when they were in field goal
That's
range
the
to
thing.
pull their
Like,
upset.
Remember,
there was luck involved.
Yeah,
here,
remember,
too.
some of these wins were not like, oh, they found the answer late in the game. It's like, no, the answer was the other team screwing up somehow in spectacular fashion through no control of yours. Like, you just happened to be there while someone else dropped the ball.
But they still, beat the Bills in the AFC Championship. They go to the Super Bowl, and then the Eagles just dominated that entire game.
Yeah.
The big questions for Kansas City the last couple of years, points per game are way down, but they're also, again, this idea of calibrated to this defensive style of football. They just have not been explosive. They have not been a downfield throwing team, which is what they obviously were early in Patrick Mahomes' career. That was supposed to be different last year. They brought in Hollywood Brown as a free agent. They drafted Xavier Worthy in his 4.21 speed. They had Rashee Rice. Well, that didn't work because Hollywood Brown got hurt. Right, Rashee Rice got injured in week 4.
Yeah.
And then Xavier Worthy was not used as that deep threat. All reports coming out of Kansas City, though, hey, we want to be explosive again. We want to get the ball down the field. So that's what I want to start with. The defense, this has been a defense-first type of team, defense and ball control team the last couple of years. It's worked. They've won a lot of games. Can they create more big plays offensively this year with the speed receivers presumably healthy, even though Hollywood's dealing with some training camp injuries at the moment?
Yeah, like it is worth pointing out, the last couple of years, really since sort of trading away Tyreek Hill, like the offense has had to go in a different direction, and it's been worse in the last couple of years. But I don't think that necessarily means there isn't a better version of this offense in there. It's like, if you look at the last couple of years, there's been quite a large amount of, upheaval in the wide receiver room. And 2 years ago, Rashee Rice kind of came out of nowhere and almost rescued the group, Like he emerged as their top target at wide receiver. And that kind of, once they realized that and really lent into it and started feeding him as the number one target, suddenly the offense got itself together. And that was like that sort of coincided with the late run that they made that year, right? Into the playoffs, through the playoffs, Super Bowl. That's like, that got them together. And then last year, it was like, well, on top of that, you've added Marquise Brown and you've added Xavier Worthy. And now, it could be spectacular. But as you said, Marquise Brown goes down, very early and effectively for the year. So we never really got to see what he would look like within that system. Rashee Rice goes down in week 4. That changes everything. Xavier Worthy gets forced into a completely different role than he was supposed to have. And so suddenly, for the entire season, effectively, we were not witnessing what was supposed to be that offense, the way it was designed, the way it was supposed to work with the players in it. Now, injuries happen every year. Who knows what it'll look like this year? But in theory, you're getting Rashee Rice back. Marquise Brown is supposed to be there. You're going to put Xavier Worthy back in a role that he's supposed to be with, from the outset. Theoretically, this is going to be a different offense than it was for the entirety of last year because different players are there, and the players that are holdovers are going to be in different roles.
So there's just a few more question marks, right? There's questions at receiver, and then you throw in the Travis Kelce question mark. Certainly didn't look like himself last year. It doesn't mean he was useless. Like, that guy is still good at getting open, still has a great feel for the game, but there was a lot of plays where he gets open and he just did not make a man miss the way he did in previous years. So you could tell he kind of lost a step. As one who's always hesitant to write older players off, I'll give it, you give it, to me, it's like, let's give it one more year. Was that just an offseason touring with Taylor Swift and he wasn't in the best shape? Like, because if he can, even if he is what he was last year, that's still a useful security blanket for Patrick Mahomes, even if he doesn't have that after-the-catch ability. So a few more question marks at playmaker probably than the Chiefs would like, but there's a ton of potential there, given all the speed and the idea that maybe Kelce could get that step back for one more run at it here.
I mean, the connection that Kelce has with Mahomes and the ability that they each have to read the game, he's never going to be a negative, on the offense. Like, even if he's completely lost the ability to move around simply by understanding where to stand on a given play, he's going to be a useful part of the offense. The question is, has he lost that ability to be a real difference maker and a completely uncoverable part of the offense? And that may be gone at this point. But I think, so you lose that sort of value add. You lose the dominant version of Travis Kelce that you had earlier in his career. It does kind of look like that player may no longer be there. But you've got a guy who's incredibly savvy, who understands how to get open, who can work with Mahomes on broken plays. But now that means that group we talked about before, the receiving core that's a little bit up in the air, Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, maybe Jalen Royals, the rookie, lower down. Like, those guys have to pick up that slack that used to be Travis Kelce.
And the even bigger question mark this offseason was the offensive line. Coming off of a Super Bowl where the Eagles didn't blitz, they rushed 4 the entire time, got pressure early and often against Mahomes in this offense, and that's with Joe Thuney gone, probably the best pass-protecting guard in the NFL, forced to play left tackle last year. We know there was a lot of left tackle issues, so Thuney's gone, so you open up a hole at left guard. They brought back Trey Smith at right guard. That was a big question there, but the story is going to be at left tackle, where the last couple of years it's been a revolving door of rookies, just trying rookies and random veterans. It has not been great, but now this offseason, kind of a halfway, decent 2-year deal for Jalen Moore, who was coming off of a good stretch of play for the 49ers. But the bigger story being at pick 32 overall, Josh Simmons, the left tackle out of Ohio State, who a lot of people has as a top 10 left tackle, coming off a patellar injury last year. But he's been full go for camp and looks like he's going to be the starting left tackle, and looks like probably the best pass-protecting left tackle they've had since Eric Fisher. He is a rookie still, and rookies have their ups and downs, but that's going to be one of the stories here. Who fills in at left guard? Probably Kingsley Suamataia, Mike Caliendo, those guys battling there, and then rookie Josh Simmons. That left side of the line will still be a question, but I think there's some optimism for the future there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, they were tasked with the offensive line this offseason. It was going to be difficult because they had, players coming up for contract. Like, heading into the offseason, I think a lot of people assumed they were going to lose Trey Smith because his deal was up. They had places they wanted to put the franchise tag. They had money tied up in the offensive line already. And it's like, I don't know if you can give him top of the market money. The way they got around that is they decided, okay, let's trade away Joe Thuney, because his deal is getting towards the end. He's getting up there in age. We can't really afford to keep both of them. And we'll use the Joe Thuney money on Trey Smith. First of all, we'll apply the franchise tag to him. Eventually, they've got him now locked up to a long-term deal. But that's what they decide. Like, let's cash in on the older player. Let's get something now and use that money to keep Trey Smith, who, Brandon Thorne, who was on the show last week or the week before, talking about offensive linemen. He's got Trey Smith, I think, as the second or the third best guard in the NFL. Like, he's one of the best young guards in football. Let's use the money on him. And then you've got this, well, what do we do at the tackle spot? And as you said, they went with a kind of hybrid approach. Let's give Jalen Moore, a moderate deal, one that could see him as a starting left tackle. But then let's also find a guy like Josh Simmons in the draft. Whether or not they targeted him or whether they just got kind of lucky that a guy with a major injury like that slipped. And remember, like, the Chiefs' medical staff has come up clutch before. I mean, Trey Smith fell to day 3, deep into day 3 because of medical concerns. The Chiefs cleared him and said, this is all much about nothing. And Trey Smith is he the best paid guard in the NFL now? One of the best paid, one of the best guards in football. All because basically the Chiefs medical staff was the one that was willing to say, don't worry about it. Take this guy. We're good to go.
Defensively, when we talk about the Chiefs, Spags has done a great job there. Again, they had their issues against the Eagles on both sides of the ball, including the defense. A little bit of turnover there, though, but they still look pretty strong. Chris Jones back as the star. Tershawn Wharton is out, but they still brought back Nick Bolton at linebacker, brought in Christian Fulton at corner. They've done a nice job of building cornerback depth these last couple years. The defensive line depth has taken a little bit of a hit, but this is where, coming out of the draft, we loved what they did in the draft. Ashton Galati in the 3rd round, Omar Norman-Lott in the 2nd round, disruptive interior defensive lineman. I think they still have that depth. It's just a little bit younger on that defensive line. So I think Spags has been fantastic, really good at closing games out. We've seen that over the years. I'm more curious to see how their style is this year. They just shortened the game a lot last year. Offensively, a really slow 10-play type of style, and then you kind of trust Spags, and he's going to make it work on 3rd down. And I think his last few years as defensive coordinator with the Chiefs, to me, it just is he's making life difficult for the quarterback, just making completions hard to come by, making downfield throws tough to come by, making them into tighter windows. Will they give up some tight window throws? Absolutely, but they're just making the margin for error really small for opposing offenses.
Yeah, it's worth reinforcing that point that we absolutely love their draft class. I think I liked every single player that they drafted this year. They might be the only team that's the case. Like every single player, you're like, that's a really good draft pick. And honestly, all of them could contribute to this team. Whether like Brashad Smith in the 7th round, running back out of SMU, he could seriously carve himself pretty quickly like a significant role within this offense. I mean, he's got third down back potential. I think he can be more than that as well, given how young he is to the position of running back. He was a former college wide receiver that converted. That's their 7th round pick, and that could end up being a serious part of this offense. Like the same thing is true with 4th rounder Jalen Royals. The defenders they drafted, whether it's the guys at the top, Omar and Norman Lott in the 2nd round, Ashton Gelati of Louisville in the 3rd, and even Jeffrey Bassa, the linebacker. I mean, core special teamer, but there's defensive snaps to be had as well. This is the type of draft class that could be huge for a team, like Kansas City, that's in the Super Bowl basically every year, that's picking at the bottom of the round every single time. If they have a draft class that is as good as it looks on paper, that's going to be massive towards helping this team sort of maintain its spot at the top of the order.
High level, when we look at the Chiefs here, remember a couple years ago, reset the roster with Tyreek Hill being traded and saying, hey, we're going to get younger. We're going to draft a little bit more. We're going to put more resources into the defense. George Karlaftis was one of those first-rounders that year. He just signed a big deal. Trent McDuffie becoming one of the best young corners in the NFL. We're starting to see, and this is what's been impressive about the Chiefs, is as they were transitioning to a younger roster, they're winning Super Bowls or going to the Super Bowl. So they did not take a step back to take 2 steps forward. I think it's another slight transitional year, right? You have another year of Chris Jones getting a little bit older. George Karlaftis is making the money on the defensive line now. He's getting paid. So I think you're just starting to get younger and younger. And as you mentioned, maybe Josh Simmons stepping in at left tackle, the rest of those rookies having opportunities to contribute. Xavier Worthy, I think, has a chance to really take a big step forward here, especially if they use him vertically a little bit more. So slight transition year, and you're always going to get that, I think, with the Mahomes Chiefs, right? You have to bring in some younger players and bring them along and see if you can continue to win at a high level. 11.5, though.
Yeah. The other thing
in
you're
a pretty
seeing,
good division that we're breaking down here.
The other thing you're seeing, I think, is the power now. It's really kicking in. I mean, every year it gets more and more this way. But you're really seeing the power of how team-friendly that Mahomes contract is that they signed him to. That's not to say it's not good for Mahomes as well. I mean, he's going to pocket the better part of $500 million over the course of this deal. But now, a few years into it, I mean, his cap hit this year is like 10% of their cap, which for a guy who is still widely seen as the best quarterback in the NFL, or certainly as good as any quarterback in the NFL, for him to only be taking up 10% of the cap is huge for a team that's trying to maintain, a Super Bowl caliber roster year on year. It gets so hard to do that. You run out of margin for error when you're paying the quarterback big money. But at this point, like Mahomes' quarterback deal is a steal for them, given and gives them so much flexibility.
All right, man, 11.5. Like I said, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders maybe on the upswing. Looks like it's a much better division than it was 2 years ago when the Chiefs were the only team over 500. Where are you going on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go under, which is weird because they might be a better team than they were a year ago, but the division is so much tougher. That all 4 teams in that division could be good and pretty competitive. So just for that reason alone, you could see all 3 teams could take a win off Kansas City. Maybe they won't, but all 3 of them could easily steal a win from the Chiefs just within the division. And then, some regression in the close games from a year ago. Let's go under.
All right, I'll still go over, even though I agree with everything you're saying. I think the rest of the division gets a little bit closer, and yeah, some of the luck probably doesn't go their way, but they'll still find a way to get their wins. I think they've shown they're a malleable team. Malleable team when it comes to finding ways to win these last couple of years. Let's go Los Angeles Chargers. And are you ready?
Yes, I am.
We're going to hype up the Chargers. I'm ready to hype up the Chargers again. Year 13.
What an unusual course of events.
Year 13
in August
of hyping up the Chargers in the offseason. But they were 11-6 last year. I don't even think we hyped them up last year. My take last year at this time was more like, hey, Jim Harbaugh feels like a guy who needs a couple years. So he does quick turnarounds. but needs a couple of years to really get the team to fully, look like Jim Harbaugh and be there. But I think it happened pretty quickly, right? That's not to say Jim Harbaugh's never had quick turnarounds. He's turned things around well at
he usually
4
has,
different spots. Yeah. But pretty quickly, the Chargers played good defense, and they were a second-tier team in the AFC, but they were pretty competitive right off the bat in the Jim Harbaugh era.
Yeah, if anything, the sort of feel last year was negative on the team as a whole, but it was like Harbaugh generally has had really quick turnarounds in places, but can he do it with this roster and, with the Chargers that doesn't look that amazing? And actually, he was. So that was the question heading into last year is, the Harbaugh thing will go well. The question is, will it go well this season? And it went pretty well last season. So you have to give, at this point, you have to give him respect as being genuinely one of the better head coaches in the NFL, based off his track record at both the NFL and college. He has not failed anywhere, and he's actually had success pretty significantly, pretty quickly, everywhere at multiple different programs in college, now at multiple different stops in the NFL. That's a very rare resume. There aren't many people who can say that with the kind of breadth of opportunities that he's had. So it's been going extremely well. Obviously, though, now the next step is the hardest one to take, from just being pretty good to being, how do you knock off the Chiefs in your own division? How do you go to the Super Bowl? How do you win a Super Bowl? That's the hardest step.
And from a team building perspective, it wasn't just, hey, Harbaugh's coming in. There was some serious turnover at various points on the roster. They had to get rid of a lot of money, which is really interesting. The two big names that they walked away from 2 years ago, or before last year, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen at wide receiver. It's Justin Herbert has nobody to throw to, which was somewhat true, but we'll get to that in a second. All of a sudden, a year later, Keenan Allen just re-signed. He's back on the roster. Mike Williams re-signed, but then he retired.
Right.
So the two guys that they walked away from, and I remember a couple years ago when the receiver market, there was two guys over $20 million. There was a point where the Chargers had the biggest two-man investment at receiver, where both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were making over $20 million, which was a lot at that time. But they're just at the end of their career, and they couldn't do that. So they get younger receiver, but they also end up getting those guys back a year later.
The question was, can you carry two receivers earning more than $20 million a year on the roster? And now the Bengals are carrying one who's on $40 million a year and a second who's on 25. That's where the market has gone in just a couple of years for a wide receiver. It's pretty nutty when you look at it that way.
Things have changed. Offensively, Justin Herbert also had a strange season where early on we were joking that he's having these Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy type of games. He's 16 for 22 for $140, and so they weren't throwing the ball a ton. Then he hits this stretch, and Herbert, maybe he's just really streaky, hits this stretch where he's playing great football, but then sometimes even within games, remember the Bengals Sunday Night Football game, he had a stretch where he goes 6 for 20 and a stretch where he looked unstoppable. So it was kind of inconsistent for Herbert, and then he takes care of the ball the entire season and then has 4 interceptions against the Texans in the playoff game. So there was a lot of inconsistencies to Herbert's game, but I think the pieces are there once again. Offensive line is in good shape. They drafted Joe Alt last year, Alt and Rashawn Slater. One of the best tackle duos in the league. They just paid Slater a lot of money. Receivers still a bit of a question, but they've thrown a lot at it, and I think they had a great find last year with Ladd McConkey in the second round, who looked, he was their clear go-to guy. Now it's going to be a question of some of their other draft picks, Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, getting those guys to step up next to McConkey.
Yeah, McConkey's great. They bring back Keenan Allen, who can still do some stuff within this offense, particularly because they can use him where he needs to be used. And then the question becomes, what can they get basically out of either Quentin Johnston or the rookies, right? They drafted Trey Harris this year, and also Keandre Lambert-Smith, who's been playing fantastically in training camp by all reports. He was the guy that sort of showed out in the Hall of Fame game as well, made a couple of plays there. So, maybe Trey Harris coming out of that offense at Ole Miss, it's a very different offense. He was an unusual prospect to study in large part because of that. His adjustment period may take some time, whereas, it doesn't have to be just him. It can be either him or Keandre Lambert-Smith, or, Quentin Johnston shows that one game where he had $180. If he could do that more than once, that would be outstanding as well. So But now you're not relying on that guy being your number one. You're now relying on him just getting something consistent from that spot.
And then you have the running back. The running back
The
room
running
here.
back.
Last year, they had J.K. Dobbins before he got hurt. He was creating some big plays. You know Harbaugh wants to run the ball. They go running back in the first round with Marion Hampton. He was a workhorse at North Carolina. Big playability, but also ability to grind it out in between the tackles if needed. I think they're going to make Hampton into a workhorse right away. They were going to maybe split time with Najee Harris right away, but the offseason incident with Najee, we'll see what ends up happening here. I kind of like that as a 1-2 punch there with Hampton and Najee Harris. And Najee's, I think can get some tough yards. His problem, I think, has been the big plays and actually getting over 4 yards per carry.
Well, it will be interesting to see what the deployment of those two looks like. Because, Najee Harris has been relatively underwhelming in the NFL so far. He is, however, huge and kind of difficult to tackle just because, the classic old school way of thinking of, late in the fourth quarter, do you really want to be sticking your shoulder into a 240-pound running back, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if Najee Harris's sort of deployment or efficiency improves if he becomes the guy that comes in late once, Marion Hampton has already done some damage and worn down a defense. Can he have more of an impact as a relief pitcher as opposed to the guy that leads out trying to grind them down to begin with, which I don't think really worked that well in Pittsburgh. That will be kind of interesting to watch.
Offensive line-wise, they had in Mekhi Becton last year. Remember, I'm not saying he was the key to the Super Bowl, but he's won 100% of the Super Bowls with the Eagles.
He certainly didn't.
With the Eagles.
He didn't.
He was the missing piece. No, he really took to playing right guard last year. I mean, this is a massive offensive line on the right side with Joe Alt and Mekhi Becton. They have a chance to, I think, get a little bit closer to this, Harbaugh-esque type of team that can really pound the rock, and then figure out what Herbert can do. What are your thoughts on Herbert? He's quite the hot button quarterback discussion. Because if you ask some people, that dude's been great, and he's a top 5 quarterback, and you've got the big 4, and then Herbert's the clear 5, and then other people are like, dude's a 500 quarterback his entire career. What are you doing with that?
I feel like at the moment, now it's a much smaller sample size because we're only talking about a couple of games, but he's dealing with the Lamar Jackson thing, which is he hasn't been a good postseason quarterback. He's been a better regular season quarterback than he's been a postseason quarterback, and maybe that's just noise, maybe that's just the variance of football. And particularly, this is the thing I think people don't necessarily think about when you focus on things like that. If you're not part of like a juggernaut team and you make the playoffs, you're probably not going to, you're going to lose those games most of the time because you're not as good as the teams that are, in the number 1 seed or the 2 seed and expected to go to the Super Bowl. You're the wild card fringe team that got there. And you're now playing the better teams that, like those teams like Miami or like Dallas where, you beat the bad teams, you lose to the good teams. So automatically you're expected to lose that game. That doesn't mean you can't play well in those situations. But so it's just a complicating factor that, if you're making the postseason as a team that is not a juggernaut, you're probably behind the 8 ball going into that game. And so expectations are that you're not necessarily going to dominate, win, et cetera, et cetera. But at the moment, I think it's fair to say that he can be a spectacular regular season quarterback. There is yet to be much evidence that he can be that in the postseason. And if he wants to be talked about in that group, right? A year or two ago, it was a debate about whether Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow. I don't think it's a debate at the moment. Joe Burrow is clearly in that top echelon. I don't think Justin Herbert clearly is. Now, if he wants to be in that echelon, that's the next step, right? Is do what you do in the regular season in a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, not to harp on it too much, there's a lot of people who would choose Herbert over Burrow. There's a lot of people.
Still?
Yeah, I think so. Because
I think that's crazy now.
Yeah, I think Burrow's a better quarterback, but I get it with Herbert. I mean, I absolutely get it. I think the consistency aspect of it, I say consistency a lot, which, I hate that because it's like double speak for just be good more often. But I used to say this about Josh Allen. Remember there was Allen felt like the streakiest quarterback in the NFL because he had stretches where he couldn't hit a throw, and he had stretches where he looked like Superman. Now he's far more Superman than the negative plays, Allen. Does he still had a game where he went 9 for 30 last year, though, right? So when the wheels fall off, that can happen. That's what happens with Herbert. And sometimes it's stretches of games. Sometimes it's first half to second half. If he puts that all together, I still think he's a very good quarterback. And then finding that balance between Jim Harbaugh, the Greg Roman offense that does want to be a little bit more run heavy. They were getting some big plays out of Herbert. But I think, finding that complement next to Ladd McConkey is going to be huge because at the end of the season, he was the only guy that could be trusted. I'm not saying the Chargers are 1 year away necessarily, but don't forget, they stripped this roster from a lot of key veterans, and they're building it back up again. I think next year, they'll be just another year closer and maybe really competing. I feel like there's still another year to go here, but they're going to be very good, especially on both sides of the ball. But there's still some questions at wide receiver 2, pass rusher, and some of the other things we'll talk about defensively.
I mean, the real point with Herbert, I think, is that clearly he's in the group of quarterbacks that's capable of going toe-to-toe with any quarterback. Like, whether or not it's going to happen every week or, that he's as good generally as that top group. And I think, to me, the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL are fairly clear at this point. Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, and Lamar Jackson, right? I think Herbert has as good a case as anybody to be number 5, but I think that's a fairly clear step drop, in my opinion, between those top 4 and the next guy up. But because he's got the size, he's got the arm, he's got the athleticism, he's got the stretches of play, Herbert could beat any of those guys in a random game, right? And that's the important part, is if you get to the playoffs, do you have a quarterback that is even capable of going toe-to-toe with the murderer's row you're going to have to run through in the AFC to make the playoffs? And I think for the Chargers, the answer to that has to be yes. Like, Herbert hasn't yet shown that he's going to do that in the playoffs, but clearly he's got the potential to.
And, like you said, when you talk about can he do it in the playoffs, we have a historic collapse, and we have 4 interceptions against the Texans when he had only 3 in the entire season. So that's not helping the Herbert narrative right now. Defensively, I think officially they ended up second in the league or first in the league in points per game allowed. The Chiefs were first until they played their backups the last week. But for whatever, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the Chargers were very good defensively. And they're another interesting one where the on-paper defensive roster looks pretty good. It's not great. It doesn't look like one of the best defenses in the NFL, but Jesse Minter comes in. They're running all the Mike McDonald-esque schemes, right? That's one of the derivatives of the Fangio and Mike McDonald and the hot schemes around the NFL, and they did a really good job, especially in the pass game. And Joey Bosa's out, but they haven't really had him over the last couple of years. They bring back Khalil Mack for 1 year, $18 million. I love that. What are your thoughts on this defense, who I thought surprised, and I don't want to say overachieved, but surprised, we'll say, last year with how well they played?
It was amazing. I mean, Harbaugh brings some of his coaching staff with him from Michigan, whose defense had been amazing in college, and this looked spectacular with, as you said, like a group that personnel-wise, I don't think it's as strong as it was in the previous years where we were expecting the Chargers defense to be good, and it was terrible. So I think it was pretty spectacular last season, given what they had in terms of personnel. The question is still, did they add enough in the offseason to try and it's a bit like Minnesota's defense, right? Where Flores has been doing amazing work, and we've been talking about it being sort of smoke and mirrors because ultimately the talent level there is not that good. And at some point, that kind of gets exposed a little bit by certain teams, or either way, you keep talking every offseason about can they bridge that gap between what the coach is doing and the personnel there to make it happen. Minnesota, I think, has done a good job of doing that in the last couple of years. This Chargers defense feels like it's still very much a work in progress along those lines. Now, you can argue they don't need to bridge it as much because they're already one of the best defenses in the league on paper. But you look at the talent level, the personnel, you're like, there's still some pretty weak spots. Yeah, but they hit on 5th round corner last year at Tarheeb Still. Who looked great.
He looked good right away. That's what's interesting, right? This Ravens front office coming over, and I think they've done a nice job hitting on some draft picks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Underrated players. Tier Tart up front on the defensive line. They haven't been great as far as just pure physicality up front over the last couple of years, but he could still play. Diane Henley, who you called a breakout player this year, and Chargers fans reminded you he broke out last year, Sam. But he did a nice job at linebacker last year, and of course, they had the great Derwin James flying around all over the place in the secondary. So It's another one. I don't know if they can keep up. It's really difficult to have 2 straight years of high-end defense like that. But they have many of the same pieces returning. Elijah Molden coming off of injury, but they re-signed him to play safety. They did a good job of just getting good contributions from a whole bunch of underrated players, and it looks like that's what they're going to need to do once again.
Yeah, no, agreed. They just need to sustain what they did last year. Like, the question is less will they collapse because of personnel. It's more, it's not that this defense is new, but it's becoming the kind of the meta defense, the in vogue system right now, and it's starting to proliferate throughout the NFL, which automatically brings with it, the subsequent cycle of the league fighting back, right? So will it sustain that? Will it be able to ride out the rest of the league getting a better handle on how to attack this specific variant of defense?
And it does seem, unlike the Legion of Boom-esque defense, which was, I would describe that as more player-driven.
Yeah.
Right? When everyone tried to replicate that around the NFL, it was difficult to replicate all of the Hall of Famers that they had making that work, or
right.
fringe Hall of Famers. This defense it can be more of a no-name type, just like a Flores, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're living in these extremes, in Flores' case, you're living in extremes. In the McDonald-Minter defense, it's not that you don't need good players. Of course you need good players, but if you're just trying to, avoid explosive plays and just be in the right place at the right time, and there is a way to get away with it without the best personnel. So that's why I say on paper, I feel like the Chargers give this front office one more year, get another draft class in there. I'm not saying they won't be good this year. I think they'll be very good. But I am real interested to see what year 3 looks like for the Chargers, getting 1 year closer. But we'll make a pick here. Over under 9.5 here for the Chargers this season, Sam.
I'll go over. I think they will be a double-digit win team, but maybe only just.
I've been trying to stay balanced with my over-unders here. I've been trying to stay as balanced as possible within the division. But I went over for the Chiefs. I'm going to go over for the Chargers as well. But I'm optimistic about this entire division. You're going to hear it.
Seriously.
I'm optimistic about all of them.
Yep.
Including the Broncos. They're up next. And a year ago, we weren't as high on the Broncos. We didn't know what to expect with them. I'm probably going to need your take on the Sean Payton analytics here that were going around. But 10-7 last year, Denver Broncos. I think one of the surprise stories, really competitive. Bo Nix, I thought, had a really slow start, finished strong. And I think for the first time since Sean Payton left New Orleans, we started to really see him in that offensive guru, genius type of lens that he used to have. And then the Broncos defense, man, just flying around, unbelievable pass rushers. Not necessarily star-driven beyond Patrick Surtain, but just a good, solid roster across the board. And I think that's where people slept on the Broncos, myself included, last year, was just how solid they would be top to bottom on that roster.
Yeah.
And they did a really nice job last year. They're over under this year's 9.5 as well.
Yeah, they were very good last year. The big question is just, was what we saw from Bo Nix real, or did he just hit a good vein of form and look really good in the second half of the season? If it was real, like if that was his development arc, where early in the season, incredibly low average depth of target, incredibly risk averse, not bringing that much to the table, bringing more of a rushing threat than a passing threat. That it didn't look good early on, but then he just hit a groove, and suddenly you're seeing, he does look like a perfect quarterback for a Sean Payton offense. And Sean Payton seemed to be broadening what he was calling now, having more faith in the quarterback. You had more of a big play threat. He was being more aggressive, pushing the ball deeper down the field. You still have the rushing threat, which I think people always underestimate with Bo Nix. If that's real, like if that's where he was going, and I know, like, again, it's a bit like the Bryce Young thing. You look at some of the stats in terms of how many hundreds of yards did he throw for in this game? Some of them weren't spectacular at all, but he played well for a lot of that second half. If that was a genuine indication of his development, you have to feel good about Denver overall.
I would almost push it the other way, because he had 4 touchdowns, no picks in the last game against the Chiefs in Week 18.
Well, he's the
against
argument.
Their backups.
Yeah.
Broncos fans are like, oh, these are historical stats. He completed 66% and 29 touchdowns. Rookies never do this. I thought that was a little bit fake as well.
But he's also the argument against the point I made with Justin Herbert, which is if you sort of sneak into the playoffs as a wild card type of team, you're going to face these good teams and, you're behind the eight ball. Bo Nix played well against Buffalo. Like, okay, it's not like it was a massive output game, but he played well in that game in a way that I don't know that Herbert has played in the postseason. So it's not like it's impossible to play well if you're an underdog team in the playoffs, but it does, I think, make it more challenging.
So, yeah, this Broncos team, man, I think they've got a good offensive line, an intriguing good group of playmakers. It's Cortland Sutton and then a whole bunch of guys that can contribute.
Troy Franklin, breakout season.
Troy Franklin's already tearing it up at camp. We're waiting for him and Marvin Mims to go off here, but especially Franklin. So they have a lot of options there. And then, like I said, defensively, they were one of the tougher defenses in the league last year, pass rush coming from all over the place, and I think they tightened up some of their weaknesses, added incredible depth in free agency and in the draft. So I think they're in a good spot. The one thing I'll add about Bo Nix, early on, I thought his intermediate passing was the big question. 10-plus yard throws, his accuracy was all over the place. I think what Nix did to remain efficient was use his legs. He was a timely scrambler. I thought he picked up a whole bunch of hidden yards. I think that almost bought him some time as he was developing as a passer.
Yeah.
I say that a lot about running quarterbacks.
It does, yeah.
More so like in the designed running game, where I say, look, Anthony Richardson, while he's developing, we got the designed run game. That'll open up things in the passing game. It'll buy you some time. I think we saw that with Bo Nix, right? There were some ugly passing games in there, but he would find a way to convert first downs and use his legs and, just hit a couple passes and keep them competitive. And then by the end of the year, you're like, all right, things are getting better and better for Bo Nix here. So, yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens in year 2 of his development here.
No, he had a ton. I mean, his scrambling was huge. Like you said, it wasn't necessarily part of the design run game, but the point is a rushing quarterback can buy himself wiggle room by the point is keeping the chains moving, right? It doesn't really matter how. Usually when you have an athletic, dynamic quarterback, you're going to create designed runs for the guy in today's NFL, and that's how those guys can buy themselves room. But the point is just keep the chains moving. So Bo Nix's was less in the design run game, and it was more scrambles. But the point is he kept the chains moving. So he had a lot of scrambles over the course of the season where, again, I think people underestimated his athleticism, and that absolutely bought him a bunch of first downs. It bought him a bunch of extended drives that if he was simply relying on his arm would not have been there.
They also had very little run game. They were not getting.
Yeah, I mean, he led the team rushing in a bunch of games.
Javonte Williams didn't look the same. Audric Estime fumbled once, and they never gave him the ball. That was a mistake, not giving Estime the ball a little bit more. But this year, with the entire offensive line coming back, they drafted R.J. Harvey in the second round. O-line looks like one of the league's best, in part just because there's continuity. They're all coming back, and they're good across the board. Including Quinn Miners, who we've talked up quite a bit here as a top 2 or 3 guard in the NFL, like their tackles and Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey. They're good. They're good offensive up front from an O-line perspective, both pass protection and run block-wise. So they should have a better run game if one of those guys hits. They bring in J.K. Dobbins, once again, when he's healthy, big playability, right? He was still rattling off 40, 50-yard runs last year with the Chargers when he's healthy. And then pass catcher-wise, I'm intrigued, man. I thought Marvin Mims had a really nice breakout second half in more of a gimmicky type of role, moving him around, putting him in the backfield. Troy Franklin's getting a lot of buzz. Pat Bryant is getting a lot of buzz. There you go, Walt. You were talking him up all throughout the draft. He ran 4.6, but he plays faster and he's pretty good. Devon Vele was a really nice 7th-round pick last year. So they have all of these pretty good pieces, some speed, some possession types, and then Cortland Sutton as the main guy. I think their receiving core is going to be pretty solid.
It felt like, I don't know if it was just coincidental timing or if it was cause and effect, but once Bo Nix started to play better and Sean Payton started to get a better handle on, how to open things up for Bo Nix, he also got a much better feel for how to play to the strengths of all the other players on offense as well. Like that's when Marvin Mims started to get the role that was turning him into a playmaker. If that's where Sean Payton is, again, it doesn't really matter whether or not Bo Nix is the catalyst there, but if that was real and that was a Sean Payton starting to get it together again with this group, there's reason for optimism for all those guys. The Franklin thing, I mean, it's a little bit of a bit because we really liked Troy Franklin coming out, and he was not good last year. He was, however, open a lot last year. I mean, the reason he wasn't good is because he dropped a bunch of deep passes or, was just missed on a bunch of deep targets. But maybe the more important point is he was open quite a lot behind the defense for big explosive plays. And if that simply regresses to the mean or goes in the opposite direction, it's very real that Franklin could explode and have a significant role.
You know me, I've said that for years. The more important skill is the getting open deep. There's not a lot of guys doing that.
I mean, I'm not willing to say that it's more important, but it's certainly relevant.
Concede your point that we've argued about for over a decade. My point is, if you're going to get open 10 times, the average receiver gets open 3 times, and you're going to get open 10 times down the field. If you only catch 7 of them, you're still adding value, right? Oh, it's an ugly drop. Oh, you did it again, Troy. It doesn't matter. I'm adding 4 other explosive plays that everyone else is not. So, oversimplifying here, but yeah, I think Troy Franklin's explosiveness, Marvin Mims' explosiveness, Cortland Sutton's dependability, there's potential here from a pass catching group. And then they added in Evan Ingram in a year where everybody wanted to mock a first-round tight end for them. I think Evan Ingram's just a really good, dependable possession type tight end as well. So this is the team I'm going to say the word solid for more than any other team because that's what they are up and down this roster.
Yeah, it feels like, when you get those offensive lines, they creep back to what average thing, but if you've got 5 solid offensive linemen, you have like a top 5 offensive line just by not having a weakness, right?
Yes.
The Broncos roster feels like the roster version of that. If you are just solid everywhere, you have one of the 5 best rosters in the NFL simply by not having gaping gaps in it.
The run game is also going to be fascinating. We mentioned how bad it was last year, but J.K. Dobbins' explosiveness, Jaleel McLaughlin's shiftiness, R.J. Harvey's a bowling ball, and then Audric Estime, who we still think is awesome. I think is awesome. So out of those 4, I think they'll find someone to be more efficient running the football.
I'm fascinated by R.J. Harvey in this offense. I mean, they released their first unofficial depth chart the other day, and all the rookies are like 4th string. So it's sort of like, don't read anything into that. They're obviously one of those teams. It's like, you got to earn your way up the depth chart. You're starting off at the bottom. But I wouldn't be surprised if R.J. Harvey was like a huge part of that backfield. And he is so dynamic, so difficult to tackle. How they platoon that with Harvey and Dobbins and McLaughlin and maybe Estime as well remains to be seen. But, I mean, he's so explosive. That could be a really dynamic backfield on top of, the Bo Nix threat, even if it's just a scramble threat, the receiving threat as well on the outside. I mean, there's explosive playmakers there.
All right, let's try to do this next bit in under 2 minutes. The Sean Payton story about how he discovered Bo Nix?
I skimmed it. If there's salient pieces in there that I need, you might have to articulate them, or for anyone that didn't read it.
I know this mostly Broncos fans are going to be watching this. It's just it's a funny world because we have 2 straight years of here's how much Sean Payton loved Bo Nix, right? There's 2 years of
the backpack
stories. He was still the 6th quarterback off the board.
Sure.
And picked 12 overall.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, if you really found the best negative play avoider since Patrick Mahomes, if you really found that, would you have traded up for him? Wouldn't you be worried that one of those other 5 teams that was going to draft a quarterback? That's just the starting point. It wasn't like, okay, they got him where they got him. Fine. The analytics that Sean Payton used, like sack percentage and interception percentage, so is like the lowest negative plays that they saw. That's what he saw in Mahomes. It's an interesting one because I think what we have found through the years is that negative plays are a little bit more under the QB's control than positives.
Yeah.
If you were looking at positive plays, explosives, or however you want to chart those are a little bit more dependent on the supporting cast. So I think it is interesting because I've come to a similar conclusion thought process-wise. But anytime you're using numbers to project quarterbacks, it's not clean whatsoever.
Not.
Because I think if you look at the other players that are close to Mahomes or Nix in this avoid negatives world over the last couple of years, you'd probably find like Gardner Minshew, or you'd probably find a whole bunch of other players who did not become Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
And this isn't to say that Bo Nix had a better number than Patrick Mahomes.
I mean,
therefore, that's what he'll become. I think we're a little too early on that.
The Cliff Notes version of this thing seemed to be that Sean Payton arbitrarily pulled out like half a dozen QB or QB adjacent stats that he liked that are generally avoid negatives, added them all up and divided them by the number he had and just created an average. It's like, well, this guy is the best average of this, therefore he's the best, right? The fair representation?
Yes.
The thing that I find funny about
Peytonomics.
that, right? The thing that I find funny about that is in the same week that former Broncos legend Mark Schlereth is like, analytics are dumb, right? Analytics people are idiots. You've got Sean Payton doing like bootleg analytics, on his own, just randomly. It's like my point when I tweeted about the Schlereth thing is analytics have existed as long as football has existed, right? When old coaches are sitting in a dark room like this with an old reel-to-reel, like manually splicing film to watch tape of their opponents, that is analytics. They just didn't have the name analytics at the time. All analytics is trying to create information or trying to create insights out of information, right? Which is tendency study. That's analytics. It's just a different name. So analytics is not dumb. Is analytics applied stupidly by stupid people? Absolutely. Are there stupid people in all walks of life? 100%, right? That is your problem, not analytics. Like if you've heard an idiotic argument by a person that was talking about numbers, analytics isn't the problem. The problem is you were talking to an idiot, right? So this is evidence of how important analytics is, that Sean Payton, who presumably doesn't have a math background or a data science background, or essentially is unqualified to do this, is still doing it by himself because he believes there's power in it, right?
Oh, coaches.
That's how important analytics is as a concept, is like a head coach who has no earthly idea what he's doing when it comes to analytics. He'll still try to run his own like bootleg analytics operation to get his quarterback.
And that's how we found Bo Nix.
Yes.
All right.
That and the backpack. When he spilled his backpack out, there was nothing in there but football stuff.
Football. All right, let's go defensive side of the ball as we've gone off the rails here for the Broncos. But, man, they were impressive last year. I thought they hit a stretch where cornerback 2 was an issue. But Patrick Surtain, outstanding on that on one side. Riley Moss, and then they just drafted Jahdae Barron. I love it. I love the non-need picks in the draft. I think Barron has a chance to be that guy opposite Surtain, but Barron's just a fantastic football player. Texas was using him in and around the line of scrimmage, nickel, outside. He could do it all. So I love what the Broncos have defensively, right? So they already had one of the best defenses. Fierce pass rush coming from a whole bunch of solid players, including maybe a star in Nick Bonito, the way he played in the second half of the season. But then they had Drake Greenlaw at linebacker coming off of his injury. They had Talanoa Hufanga at safety, a couple former 49ers. So I think one of the better defenses in the NFL last year adds more pieces. Doesn't always work, translate to being better, but, man, they have a chance to be as good, if not better, next year.
It should be. They locked Zach Allen up to a long-term deal as well. I'm really curious to see, can Nick Bonito continue the run that he had last year, where he looked like one of the most dynamic pass rushers, certainly from a situational point of view, in the entire NFL. If that was his breakout season and that's who he's going to be going forward, I mean, he was a problem for offenses to block. This could be a spectacular defense again. Love the Jahdae Barron pick. I think it works perfectly within this defense as well. He's so versatile. He gives them backup options everywhere. He's a bit like different players, but a bit like Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore, where the flexibility he gives you because he could play multiple different positions. Brian Branch in Detroit as well, same idea. He can be your safety. He can be your nickel. He could play outside if you needed him to in a pinch. Jahdae Barron now gives them so much injury insulation because of what he can do.
Zach Allen just got paid defensive tackle, edge, type of hybrid player. John Franklin Myers up front. You mentioned Bonito. We both mentioned Bonito. Jonathan Cooper. Let me say solid again. I mean, that's one of those, in the aggregate, that's a whole bunch of good, effective pass rushers that helped the Broncos have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL last year. Plus, they're not afraid to blitz. They're not afraid to get after it and mix it up and be aggressive. So I think you have another good defense this year. 9.5 is the over-under for the Broncos. I've gone over for the first 2.
Right.
I really think...
find an under somewhere.
I know. I think this division has a chance to challenge the Norths. I think the AFC North is going to be strong. The NFC North is going to be strong. Are we looking at the AFC West as the second or third best division in football here?
It could easily be. I mean, genuinely, 3 of the 4 teams I think should be good to very good, and the 4th might not be bad at all because of what they added. So Yeah, I'm with you, and I even went under with the Chiefs. But even with going under for them, it's like, can all three of those teams win double-digit games and, be in the playoffs?
Again.
I guess, yeah, let's go over for Denver.
I'm going to go under, even though I like them. Somebody's got to go under. Got to go under here somewhere.
Somebody's got to lose.
Somebody has to lose at some point. Las Vegas Raiders to wrap up the West here, 4-13 last year, but they've got a lot of changes. This is maybe the most fascinating division here because we haven't even discussed the fact that it's Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, and now Pete Carroll, head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. They're over under 7.5 here from our friends over at FanDuel. Were they going to completely rebuild here? No, they trade for Geno Smith. So Pete Carroll's coming in. Tom Brady's patrolling the sidelines at practice. John Spytek's the new general manager. They pulled Chip Kelly in his national championship win from Ohio State, pull him in to call the plays as offensive coordinator. I don't know how good the Raiders are going to be right off the bat, but I think they're going to be competitive and fascinating moving parts here in Vegas.
There might not be a team that's made a bigger upgrade in the offseason than the Raiders in terms of bringing in Geno Smith and Pete Carroll, right, as a combination. Maybe Tennessee with Cam Ward if he's as good as he could be. But it's that type of thing. It's as big a move as anybody has made. And they've gone from, a bad quarterback situation to a good one. Now, is Geno Smith perfect? No. Is he an elite quarterback? No. Does he have, fairly catastrophic red zone problems on the regular? Yes. But he's still a very good quarterback overall. And that's the important part. They've got some weapons for him to play with. They've got a pretty good offensive line. They drafted Ashton Genty, who could be insane at running back. Like, this should be a good team. Now, maybe you then look at defense and say, okay, there's still some fairly significant problems here, but they're going to be competitive in a way that they weren't necessarily in every game before.
This is why the quarterbacks need to be put into tiers, right, and not linear lists. I
think we just need to exist in a world where there's nuance. Like, you can say the guy's good without being like, oh.
So, Geno Smith, what was our analysis when he was with the Seahawks? It's going to be tough for him to be the guy that leads the Seahawks to challenge the Eagles, the Lions, the 49ers before they fell apart last year, to challenge the best teams in the NFC. I believe that's still true. Like, I don't think Geno Smith is leading the Raiders to the AFC West title here over Mahomes and the Chiefs and some of the other teams. But compared to what the Raiders have had the last couple of years, they're going to be competitive, right? They're going to be able to win through the pass game far more often than they were in the past when Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew or Jimmy Garoppolo was there. I think Geno Smith's absolutely an upgrade. He's also a guy, I think, if you do build that infrastructure around him, yeah, you could be a playoff team. You could absolutely be a playoff team. And that's what Spytek just came from in Tampa Bay, where they had Baker Mayfield. And I think we had the same idea, right? Which is, is Baker Mayfield really going to carry you or anything? No. But now that you've got this really good roster around him and Baker's good, he's on the better side of, the rankings in the league now at quarterback, it's like, all right, you're going to have a really good competitive team. And I think that's what the Raiders are going for here. They're another team that might need another draft class. But, man, this draft class, we called it the most fascinating draft class in the NFL because of Ashton Genty, because of Dante Thornton Jr., who they get, who's 6'5" and runs 4.3. Like, dude, that guy went in the fourth round. Those guys get overdrafted in the second. What's going on? And Thornton's already making plays early on. They have Jack Bash as another.
Thornton's being talked about as like a guy that could be a real part of this offense.
Absolutely.
Like have a serious role there.
Yeah, I mean, I said he was the deep threat that I wanted. Of all the speed receivers, there was like 10 to 12 receivers who ran sub 4.4 at the combine, and he was the one, because he's not just because he's 6'5", but because it plays on the field, and he didn't get a chance to really show his stuff at Tennessee the way he could have. I think Dante Thornton could be an absolute steal in this draft. We'll see what happens. It's training camp hype right now.
Right. I forget what the actual stat is. Our friend Matt Harmon brought this up on his podcast as well. There's some stat out there that like the list of wide receivers that are 6'5" plus X weight and have run a 4.3 whatever. The list is nuts. It's like Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss or whatever, and Dante Thornton's one of them. Like, it's a very short list of players, of whom most of them are pretty spectacular, and Dante Thornton, right? Now, does that mean he's going to be the next Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson? Of course it doesn't. But the point is, this is a rare physical specimen in a world where, you've been making this point, right? It's the 99th percentile that's important. We are talking about a 99th percentile guy here. Now, again, that's not everything, but it does mean that when the 99th percentile guy starts getting hype, you might want to at least pay attention to it.
Just keep an eye on it. The draft was fascinating because of some of these players that they brought in. Let's discuss more specifically on the offense. They lock up Colton Miller at left tackle. I think he's been a good, dependable player after a slow start to his career. If you remember him when he came out, he wasn't great, but he's become a really good pass protector overall. Gave up some sacks last year, but I don't think that was telling of his entire play. Still maybe some questions at right tackle. Dylan Parham's pretty solid at left guard. Jackson Powers-Johnson probably going to kick back out to guard here. But they look okay up front. And then from a playmaker perspective, we talked about Thornton. You have Jack Bash, who's just got some physicality to him as a receiver. You have Brock Bowers, who's coming off the best pass-catching rookie tight end season of all time. You have Jacoby Myers, who's just a really good number 2. I'm not going to fast forward too much, but add one more number 1 type receiver to this group, they could be really good. But it's an intriguing group of pass catchers here for Geno Smith. And then you have Ashton Jeanty, and how much they're going to actually rely on the 6th overall pick and use him.
And you've got, Trey Tucker has been a significant part of the offense in training camp. You still have Michael Mayer there as a guy a lot of people loved as tight end 1 in his draft class before Brock Bowers came along and, really showed everyone what special tight end looks like. But those two could coexist. They're very different players. Yeah. Michael Mayer is much more of a sort of all-around blocking, heavier tight end, and Brock Bowers is more of a glorified slot wide receiver. It's absolutely possible that those two can coexist in the same offense in 2 tight end formations and thrive. So there's a lot of intriguing players now for this to work around Geno Smith. I would also say it's a little bit unknown. There's still some question marks, but I would say that offensive line is probably going to be better than what he was dealing with in Seattle. And I don't think I think he hid a lot of the biggest problems on that offensive line. And we saw that when he went down and they had to put in Sam Howell, and Howell couldn't function at all behind that offensive line. And it's Geno Smith, I think, was making up for a lot of problems in the interior of that line. Now, this might not be perfect either, and I think they're still in flux what exactly the starting 5 is going to be. But if Geno Smith is able to continue to paper over some cracks in the offensive line, if the line is good enough that Jeanty can do his thing in the backfield, and then that collection of wide receivers sort of sorts itself out in terms of what it's going to be, this could be a very good offense.
I think I've got more questions about the run game, the offensive line run blocking, more than pass blocking. And then that comes to this whole hey, the run game is being rejuvenated. We saw Saquon Barkley. We saw Derrick Henry. We're going to take Ashton Jeanty at number 6 overall. He can do the same. It's going to be a challenge, I do think, from a run game perspective. I love Jeanty. So tough to tackle. Has speed. Can run any scheme. He's not gap or zone specific. He could do it all. So I can't wait to see what Jeanty does right away. But again, I would rather see, a little bit better offensive line from a run game perspective. And then the Chip Kelly factor, where if we remember, he took the NFL by storm for about a year and a half. His offense was not completely unstoppable, but Nick Foles was incredible. He got the most out of Mark Sanchez for a period of time. He did some really good stuff early on. The league kind of caught up to it. He's done, goes back to college. He's a completely different coordinator now. He's not running the same system. He's just continued to add more pieces to his offense. So he's able to, I think, evolve to whatever he has. And I think that's a huge advantage for Chip Kelly in his return to the NFL.
Incredible evolution by him. For a guy who was almost characterized by this is the system, in a time where that was not uncommon, right? Guys were wedded to their system and this is what we run. He went from that to now we're gonna adapt to what we have and we're gonna make the best of the players that we have, and that's the best way of having success. And he was the guy credited with the development there at Ohio State of everything they had. Will Howard and the run that he went on and playing his best football at the most critical point in all the way, including a national title. It's a great resume to head to this team.
Now, defensively is where I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And even more questions in recent weeks after Christian Wilkins got released after his incident. And so Wilkins, look, if they had Christian Wilkins, the player that we have seen over the last couple of years, you could make this argument like, oh man, this could be a tough defensive line if he's out there healthy, and Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz, and now you've got former first rounder Tyree Wilson able to move around, but you kind of lose that piece in Wilkins. I think they've got some question marks up front at defensive tackle, and some huge question marks at cornerback. Intriguing once again, fascinating. I'll use all the words, because they have a guy like Darian Porter, who's a 6'2" corner, who incredible athlete, but he's a little bit older. Like every single draft pick has some intrigue and some theoretical upside, but to me they just have too many personnel questions on this side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, Porter is an incredibly interesting story, given his relative inexperience in terms of playing time, but being fairly old, but also being a spectacular athlete. I mean, he's just an amazing player to keep an eye on and watch and see how his transition to the NFL works. But yes, you look at the personnel, certainly corner looks like a problem. Various other spots you would say are also weaknesses. This is why I think the Raiders on paper still look like the clear fourth best team in the division, but I think they're stronger on the offensive side of the ball, which if you're going to be flawed is the way I would want it to be. So in any given game, they could be in a shootout with one of these teams and win.
Yeah, I think the Raiders might be players in the waiver wire market. I think on the defensive side of the ball, if there's some defensive line depth, some secondary depth available, the number of players that they have listed as potential linebackers include Devin White, Jalen Smith, Jamal Adams. They have some interesting players on this roster. Max Crosby still a superstar. Malcolm Kuntz missed a lot of time last year, but he was coming off a really nice 2023. So I think they can create some pressure off the edge. Tyree Wilson, former number 7 overall pick, looks like he's a little bit better when he kicks inside from a pass rush perspective. I think they could create a little bit of havoc there. Adam Butler's been a good rotational defensive tackle, just not enough star power on this side of the ball for me.
Yeah, I did not know that Jalen Smith was still in the NFL until right now.
I know. I'm just like reading the depth chart, and it's not going to affect the season one way or the other. It's just what a group.
I mean, remember Jalen Smith. This is the Notre Dame linebacker who got injured, hurt his leg, had the drop foot thing, then looked like he was going to be a star for the Dallas Cowboys, and then went from on his way, like he got paid by the Cowboys, right? Had like a decent amount of money, and then bombed out. But from that point on, he's like bounced around the league as a backup / fringe roster player, and I thought was out of the league at this point, but apparently not.
I'll just say it. On the Tyree Wilson thing, we've beat a dead horse when it comes to that. I believe I got word that Tyree Wilson was ranked above Will Anderson on the Raiders board that year when they took him at number 7 overall. Will Anderson was already off the board at 3. But that's what it sounds like.
If you had known that information at the time, what word would you have used to describe that?
I would have been crazy.
There you go.
Crazy. I still think it's crazy at this time.
Sure.
But anyway, like I said, I'm trying to be positive here. Tyree Wilson, interior pass rush, can do some stuff. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's ticked in the right direction. I mean, he's still got a long way to go, I think, to be an impact player for them, and certainly a long, long way to go to have any hope of justifying the idea of ranking him above Will Anderson on a draft board. But he's not necessarily done as a player.
So, yeah, I've got serious questions about the secondary and do they have an defensive tackle. I'd say the biggest thing. Linebackers intriguing. Jermaine Pratt coming over from the Bengals, Landon Roberts there, all the other names that we mentioned. But, yeah, I'll keep an eye on the waiver wire here for the Raiders. Over-under is 7.5.
Last point, though. The vibes there look spectacular. I mean, with Pete Carroll out there just having fun, Zorbs at training camp and stuff like this, I don't think the vibes have been this high in Las Vegas, or certainly with the Raiders, let's say, various cities, for years. Tom Brady looming over everybody's shoulder, just making sure nobody's goofing around while they're goofing around. Just fascinating dynamic, but also incredible vibes.
This is, yes, intriguing, man. That's what I'm saying. Like, it feels like the roster's another year away, another Spy Tech draft class away, but they'll be more competitive just having Geno under center.
This iteration, by the way, of Tom Brady now just being like owner at large for various franchises and looming over people's shoulder and occasionally dropping in and like ripping apart the manager and stuff is hilarious. Because he also he's a part owner of Birmingham City, the soccer club. And they have one of these, Amazon documentaries or whatever out, like everybody does now. And there's this part in it where he like meets the manager, Wayne Rooney, who's no longer the manager, and comes out of this meeting and he's in the car and he's like, I don't know if our manager has the best work ethic. It's just the vibe I'm getting. He's like, I don't know. I might not have good instincts about these things. And then like 8 games later, they fired Wayne Rooney from his 5th job in several years. And Brady just like now being this like owner, random drop-in owner for the cameras, I think is great. People, we need to get more information on what Brady thinks that is happening with the Raiders. Nobody cares about what Mark Davis thinks. What does Brady think is happening?
And he's also just the Fox announcer.
Yeah, while he's doing that. Right.
Over under 7.5 here for the Raiders.
I want to say they're better than that, but it seems hard to be with everyone else being good. Let's say they're under, but they're a better team than their win total.
I'll say under for them as well. I don't feel great about this either. We'll say they're 7-10.
Okay.
The Raiders. They're right there. But, man, they're moving in the right direction. And, like I said, more competitive this year. Speaking of Vegas, we're going to be out there.
We are.
In a couple weeks, once again, kicking our season off at Circa. Our friends over at Circa, we went there a couple times last year before the season, which is the time to go out there because they have their contest back, Circa Million, Circa Survivor, more than $21 million in guaranteed prices. So we're going to be out there, a little bonus content in a couple weeks coming at you from Circa. We went there last year during Week 18, which was fantastic. And we got to see, front and center, Sam, people winning their $1 million, winning the contest. They were right there next to us.
Yeah.
And winning the contest there.
It was amazing. That whole weekend was phenomenal.
An electric vibe in Week 18 when the NFL's happening, all these games, playoff appearances are on the line, and then people right next to us with $1 million on the line trying to win Circa Million or Circa Survivor.
Yeah, that whole thing was amazing, but seeing specifically like every one of these teams living and dying on random, plays on second down that the Cardinals are involved in Week 18 was fascinating, but also incredible.
So the 2 contests, you got Circa Million. You could pick 5 games against the spread each week. You get 1 point for each correct selection and 1/2 point for each push. There's $6 million guaranteed in total prizes, and the first place prize gets $1 million in the coveted blue jacket. And then Circa Survivor is just 1 pick per week, no point spread. The last the longest to win it all. That's the goal. $15 million guaranteed. Both contests run from September 4th, 2025 through January 4th, 2026. You have to sign up by September 6th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Enter in Nevada, play from anywhere, $21 million guaranteed. Visit circasports.com for details. And again, look out for our special bonus content coming at you from Circa later this month.
Phenomenal place, like independent of the Super Contest. Just Circa, I think it's got to be my favorite place to stay in Vegas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
By a distance at this point.
Yeah, I tell everybody, and I stay at Circa. Forget those other places. That's where we stay. All right, man, let's go NFC West. We're 7 out of 8. One more division to discuss. NFC West here. We're going to start with the San Francisco 49ers. Coming off of a very disappointing season, 6-11 last year. Brock Purdy back and signed to a nice new contract. They had a lot of injuries last year, a lot of turmoil, kicking issues. It's going to be an interesting season here for the Niners because I think they're very talented, but turnover on the defensive line, a youth movement there. I don't think on paper they're as strong as they were heading into last year, coming off of a Super Bowl appearance. They're not as strong as they were the last couple of years, but do not sleep on the 49ers. There's still plenty of talent there.
Yeah, particularly on offense. I mean, I think that's the big thing. Their defense now, I think, is reliant on having a good draft class this year. And remember, they haven't had a good draft class in a while. The offense, though, I think still has plenty of teeth. Like, even with, trading away Deebo Samuel, et cetera, I mean, they are still returning. The new development today appears to be that in addition to running past the office, the train is taken to tooting the horn.
Let us know if you hear the train horn.
Like full My Cousin Vinny style.
Because I know you hadn't heard the train before.
But do you hear the horn? Because that's new. Anyway.
Oh, Will heard it. Oh, boy.
In addition to trading away, even after, trading away Deebo Samuel, you're still returning Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Juwan Jennings, who showed last year that he can be absolutely phenomenal. Trent Williams is still there as arguably the best offensive lineman in all of football. Kyle Juszczyk was cut only to return on a better deal for the team. Ricky Pearsall is there, their first-round pick, who his rookie season was, let's say, disrupted by being shot, right? All of these things are still there for this team to still be really, really good on offense. Yes, the offensive line is still a question mark. That's basically been true for the entirety of the Shanahan tenure there. But I would still expect this offense to be able to cook. The defense, though, is where the questions are.
Just to discuss Purdy, I agree with you. All that talent. It's not like, all right, Brock, you're making $53 million a year now. Let's see what you do. Let's see you carry the team. There will be more team-building challenges in the coming years, right? Deebo Samuel's out, right? You're not going to have all of the stars that you've had in recent years, but there's still plenty of talent there. And I think Brock Purdy's still very good. I think still a very good quarterback. When he's at his best, good decision-making, runs the offense, plays with great anticipation.
Did you see the little clip that I tweeted the other day of him talking about he was basically being asked about how do you see over the line, which is kind of interesting because in a world of, Dylan Gabriels and short quarterbacks and Bryce Young and blah, 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 he gave a really interesting answer. It was like 2 minutes where he was like, look, fundamentally you can only see over the line as it is like 40% of the time. Like it's like 60-40 in terms of when you can see, when you can't. The times where you can't see, you are effectively determining what the throw is based off the information you do have, based off reads pre and post snap. Is the safety rolling down? Is that like you're effectively determining whether you have a throw or not based off other information. You're not looking up and being like, is this open? Let's go. You're reading out the processing. And number one, clearly that's always where Purdy has been strong, right? That's why he was such an instant success and why he's good in this offense. But I think it's probably also a big reason why some of these other quarterbacks struggle so badly who are short, because they're not great at that part to begin with, and you need to lean on that more than other guys do if you're 5'10 versus 6'6.
So you don't actually see, you got to play with anticipation.
Yeah, you don't know. 40% of the plays you're effectively throwing kind of blind, and you're determining, like the throw is based off other information.
And Purdy's a great anticipatory thrower.
Yeah.
I think he's very good, and we'll have fun Purdy debates, I'm sure, in the coming years. But he's in a world where his stats are going to continue to look really good. Shanahan builds good statistical quarterbacks, but Purdy's also probably the best quarterback he's had since Matt Ryan.
And that's why also so many of these throws, like interceptions from quarterbacks, so many of them look ridiculous because it's based off like you're deducing information, right? It's like if X and Y happens, then Z is the throw. But if you misread X, then Z was not the throw, and you've just thrown the ball right to a linebacker.
That's why I said the best defense is just run to the hot zones.
Yeah, but it's also why
defense.
It's also why the Flores thing causes so many problems for everybody, right? It's because you thought X was happening, actually it wasn't, and now there's a linebacker right there that you just throw the ball to.
Continue to do unconventional things defensively. Offensive line wise too, they had a great find in Dominic Pooney last year at guard.
Yep.
They look good up front, returning 4 out of 5 starters there on the offensive line.
Another Renner guy.
Another Renner guy. Nailed it. I think they'll be very good offensively once again. Christian McCaffrey, absolutely a wild card here. There's, I think, some of the medical people in the Twitter sphere are like, hey, he should be fine. But you're talking about, what was it, tendinitis in both.
Remember what a weird thing that was last year. It was kind of like, it was almost like the J.J. McCarthy thing, where in the space of like 48 hours, McCarthy went from he's come out of that game with a slightly sore knee to, we're not going to see him till next year. McCaffrey's was like, he's got tendinitis, and then he's got it in both knees, and he's in Germany seeing a specialist, and then suddenly he's shut down for like a huge period of time. That happened pretty quickly as well.
The trip to Germany is always the most concerning thing. If you're injured and you're going to Germany, it sounds serious.
Well, I think
I would say don't sleep on McCaffrey this year just because he went to Germany last year.
Germany or, Mexico or like the Dominican Republic.
If you're leaving the country because you don't have the right stuff here.
That's the thing. See, that's critical. What it means is you are now getting something that's not really allowed in the U.S., which doesn't mean it's bad or against the NFL rules. It just means that it's like you're into like a stem cell world or whatever most of the time.
It's not into your it's not great for your recovery, probably. All right. So, yeah, I feel good about this offense.
Yeah.
Look, if McCaffrey's where he was before,
sure,
he's a game changer for this offense, too. That's what they have.
Absolutely. But even if he isn't,
changers.
like even if you took McCaffrey off the roster right now, Isaac Guerrero is an intriguing player. But this year, Jordan James was a guy who tons of people loved at draft time, the Oregon running back. And then Corey Kiner, the Cincinnati running back, I loved him as like a day 3 guy.
The next Shanahan running back.
Yeah, like the one that always is the second one down that they draft ends up being the guy. Like if Corey Kiner ends up making massive noise in this backfield, it wouldn't shock me.
The last thing I want to say about the offense, too, I mean, man, Juwan Jennings really has stepped up, as you were saying earlier. The 1-2 punch of him and Brandon Ayuk coming off of injury, and then Pearsall's deep speed.
Yeah.
I mean, they have all the pieces needed once again to have a really effective pass game down the field.
The one downside, by the way, is, as is typically the case in San Francisco in August, all is not well in terms of everybody being happy. You know, Juwan Jennings wants a raise based off being a better player than they thought he was last year. So let's assume all that gets worked out the way it generally does eventually in San Francisco. Then the personnel-wise, this is a good offense.
So there's a lot that is similar in San Francisco than it was in 2022 when they went to the Super. I was 1 year off, by the way, when they said which year? They went in 22 to the Super. No, 23 to the Super Bowl. Sorry, but in 22 they were close. Everything is similar, I would say, offensively, despite not having Deebo Samuel. The biggest difference from those Super Bowl caliber teams is the defensive depth, particularly on the defensive line, where we used to say, hey, it's Nick Bosa, and look at these other edge rushers opposite him, and look at Javon Hargrave at defensive tackle. There's turnover, a lot of turnover on the defensive line. I think that's going to determine the success for the 49ers. Nick Bosa is still a star, but they draft Mykel Williams in round 1, and so what can he do? He's really young, was not a great pass rusher in college, played through a lot of injuries, looks like a force against the run. You've got Mykel Williams. You have Bryce Huff coming in.
That could be huge.
Right? That could be huge. Reuniting him with Robert Saleh, who comes back in to run the defense. So there is some potential here. Defensive tackle looks like a weakness, but you second-rounder Alfred Collins, you bring in C.J. West from Indiana, 2 rookies that you're going to be dependent on. It's another one where if some of those guys hit, maybe my concerns are invalid, but on paper – right now, they need some of those young guys or the rejuvenation of Bryce Huff to really hit here.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's fair to be concerned. It's not that the concerns would be invalid. It's that, this is a team now where there are massive question marks, but they do have potential answers within the setup. Like, there might not be a bigger acquisition in the offseason than bringing back Robert Saleh, the guy that made this defense so amazing a few years ago, which got him the New York Jets head coaching job. If Saleh is able to work wonders on this group, theoretically, there are players there that can make this work. Obviously, Nick Bosa is still amazing. Again, he's in that category of there's half a dozen guys where in any given year, Nick Bosa could be Defensive Player of the Year, right, without anything crazy happening. He's that good. You've got Mykel Williams. That's your first-round draft pick who could be a very, very good player, has a physical tool set to make it work, bit inconsistent. Maybe the production hasn't been there, but you could see that working. Bryce Huff has previously, a year and a bit ago, been the single best situational pass rusher in all of the NFL with the coach that's going to be coaching him this year. That's a big part of that. And then, the defensive tackle situation is a massive question mark, but C.J. West is an immovable object in the run game, could be a fantastic addition. And then Alfred Collins is the guy they drafted to fix that as well. If Robert Saleh is able to make those two work quickly, it might be fine. Right? So I think it's fair to say, look, when you're saying it might be, you're already concerned, right? That's already fair to be concerned. But it's a bit like that Colts wide receiver situation a few years ago. We were like, there's a world, you can paint yourself a picture where it all pans out, but the chances are it won't.
Look, we said the same thing last year about the Niners defensive line. I think it was Leonard Floyd opposite Nick Bosa. They just did not have the same firepower rushing the passer. Javon Hargraves battled injuries. It's just it's a bigger question mark now than it was last year. Last year it was a bigger question mark than it was the previous 2 years.
But with the addition,
that's where the Niners are. But they have they've gone younger.
Yeah.
And if the quicker those guys, if those guys hit, and the quicker those guys hit, will determine a lot of this team's success.
They've gone younger, and with the addition of Robert Saleh coming back. Like,
Yes.
those are you put those two things together, it's not an unreasonable thing to say that he could make that work. Now, will he? Maybe not. But I think the potential is there for that to happen.
Overall, defensively, though, you still have the star power of Nick Bosa. You have the star power of Fred Warner. Remember, there was a point last year where Warner, with forced fumbles and interceptions, was like single-handedly winning games for the Niners, while the kicking game and other parts were falling apart. So Fred Warner's still there. In the secondary, Renardo Green had a really nice rookie season.
Yep.
Damador Lenore has broken out and become a pretty dependable player at corner. You don't have Javarius Ward, who was so instrumental in their Super Bowl run in 2023. So again, depth-wise, it's just not where it was a couple of years ago. So to characterize the Niners in the Brock Purdy era here, right, as he's making over $50 million, you're unable to re-sign certain players. You're unable to have another $20 million corner or whatever it might be. So younger players need to step up. So you just have, I think, more depth questions now than you did a couple years ago. But if a couple players do step up, man, the Niners are going to be really good again.
Yeah, secondary generally looks relatively weak despite having a good player or two in there. But it is like Fred Warner. If he wasn't a linebacker, Fred Warner would be in that defensive player of the year, any given year category, right? So you have 2 of the 10 best defensive players in all of football on this defense, and the defense still might not be good because of what's around them.
Last thing on the Niners, as the chat says, all their stars are getting older. Yeah, that's true.
Sure.
It's a really interesting time for John Lynch and that entire front office.
Who do you think's under more pressure, Lynch or Shanahan?
I'm rolling with Shanahan. I mean, I would not as more pressure. So I'll say Lynch more pressure. I think the challenge from a team building perspective, I say this a lot, right? Just because you did one or two things well previously and it led to massive results doesn't mean you could repeat those one or two things. Just because Bill Belichick discovered Tom Brady doesn't mean you could discover the next one, what have you. The Niners were so star-heavy by hitting on George Kittle in the draft or hitting on Fred Warner in the draft. Just because you did it once and that carried your team through a lot of success, can you do it again? Because the last few drafts have not been great for the Niners. And look, if Bosa, Warner, any of those guys lose a step, I mean, you're in a lot of trouble. You don't have the next star. Maybe Micah Williams is the next star. I don't know. He's got that type of potential, but It's all potential. So I'd say Lynch. I think it's been a top-heavy roster these last couple of years. I think they made a couple good decisions for incredible outcomes. It's tough to continue to do that.
I mean, it might just be coincidence. I've seen a thing that says, like, aging doesn't happen in a linear curve. It hits you at like 45 or whatever is when you age like 15 years.
In 2 years here?
But yeah.
Sweet.
But Kyle Shanahan looks like those before and after pictures of presidents, where it's like, here's what he looked like his day one of the Oval Office, and here's what he looked like his final day of a 2-term stint, and he's aged like 25 years. Shanahan now versus Shanahan when he got given that job looks like he's aged 20 years. It's nuts. Now, maybe that's, again, just coincidence, or maybe that's the kind of pressure he's under.
Yeah, I mean, I might be contradicting myself, but I feel like Shanahan has had an incredible level of consistency, right? Whereas if I said the team building effort has been top heavy, I think Shanahan has been incredibly consistent. He's just been one play away, a couple plays away. And my head says stick with that consistency, and at some point you get over the hump.
But last year also, again, this was not just him, but last year was the first year where really the Shanahan tree of offenses hit roadblocks, right? They finally, the defense league-wide started to cause them problems. It doesn't put him, I think, under more pressure necessarily. He's already under a ton, but it's a big year for him. Shanahan's been the best guy of all those coaches of like consistently evolving his offense, right? Adding new wrinkles, adding differences, finding ways to make it better and better and change it year on year. I think he needs to for the first time in a while because the league actually demonstrated that they found some answers. All
right, man. All this said, FanDuel's over-under's 10.5. people are not overreacting to last year's 6-win, or at
Yeah.
least the market's not overreacting to last year's 6-win season. Are you going over or under here, though, for the Niners?
I will go under. I think they will win 10 games, but no more.
There you go. I'll go under as well. So I'm not overreacting either. I'm just saying right around there. I'll say 10. They'll be better, but I wouldn't go over the 10.5 right now.
Chad is 82% under.
Oh, yeah, recency bias. A lot of recency bias, even with our advanced listeners. Los Angeles Rams, next up, 10-7 last year. They started, 1-5, and then made an absolute run, finishing the final 8 in the NFL. Their over-under is 9.5. They've done such a good job of winning a Super Bowl. Good job.
Yeah.
Stripping down the roster, building it right back up again with some Utes. Even losing Aaron Donald last year, saw that defensive line really take off. The biggest story right now, though, is Matthew Stafford. And I meant to ask Will and our producers and our social friends here, when we were doing our reasons for pessimism, I almost certainly brought up Matthew Stafford and his injuries, right? I would have brought that up.
We did. Well,
his back injuries, and you just never – he just feels really fragile in his late 30s. And he's had a back injury throughout camp right now, and that's going to have a big effect on this season.
We specifically brought it up for the Rams, and we said, look, you could say this for any team, right, that an injury is the reason for pessimism. But specifically for the Rams and for Matthew Stafford, it's a fair point to bring up because he's old, he's put himself through an absolute beating throughout his entire career, and he's had a reasonably lengthy list of recent injuries, right? So it's a bigger thing for them than it is for other teams who, sure, an injury to their quarterback would derail them, but there's no reason to expect one necessarily. With Stafford, there is and was, and this one is sounding not great. I mean, number one, it's a back injury, and that's always sketchy to begin with. Number two, they're reports I think I saw from Rap Sheet was the tweet. He's had like an epidural to be dealing with. I mean, this is not. It's a disc problem. Like, these are all buzzwords that make you terrified for anybody, let alone a starting quarterback.
Interesting career overall for Stafford as well. These last few years with the Rams in 2021, probably his best season. They go win the Super Bowl. He looks incredible. I thought in 2023, that was the year they were super young, developed a Puka Nacua, right? Found him and surprised some people. I thought Stafford played great. And helped that young team along and made the playoffs. And then last year, he wasn't great. He certainly wasn't great down the stretch, and they were winning a ton of games, and a lot of it was driven by the defense. And so heading into this year, if he was healthy, with Davante Adams coming in, I'm thinking, okay, I don't think Stafford's cooked. I don't look for these like, oh, he's 37, he's falling. I don't look for the cliff that the general media looks for. As soon as a player doesn't play well, oh, he must be done forever in perpetuity. I thought Stafford, healthy, would have been primed for a good season here with the entire offensive line coming back, with Davante Adams and Puka Nacua as a 1-2 punch. I thought he would have been in great shape. So whether it is him or Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup, by the way, Garoppolo is one of the best backups in the NFL. That guy can go out and win some games for you, has done it for a while, even though you might not want to have him as your starter right now.
It's also only ever 4 games away from the same injury that Matthew
Same
Stafford's
injury.
got.
I do wonder if
Stetson Bennett is QB3.
If you didn't have Garoppolo, I do wonder if Kirk Cousins would be an option here. I don't know that Cousins at this point is a big enough upgrade. I think it's an upgrade over Jimmy Garoppolo, but big enough to actually make that move. But I think the Rams, my point is, Puka Nacua is a star. Davante Adams was a star and is still very good. And I think Adams in a number 2 role can be outstanding. They have a chance to do some damage offensively here.
Yeah. I also think, I don't expect Matthew Stafford to fall off a cliff physically in terms of, oh, look, his arm's gone and he looks like last year Peyton Manning. But I wonder if his cliff looks more like Brett Favre's, where this is a guy who's been Iron Man through his career, right? Who's been like his thing
Great
has
point,
been
Sam. Great point.
Battling through ridiculous injuries and playing. Like, even if this thing, the back injury doesn't get any better, I expect him to play. Like, I expect him to go out there, maybe shot up with Toradol or whatever and just give it a go, right? And play well. But I do wonder if his aging starts to manifest the way Favre's did, where once you start hitting that age, your body just doesn't bounce back anymore, and it takes longer, and stuff breaks when it used to bend. and that kind of thing. Like, does Stafford just get broken for the first time, really? And that's what not takes him down, but that's what kind of starts the decline.
Run game wise, Kyron Williams has made just a really big impact for them. They just re-signed him to a nice deal. Interesting from a team building perspective, Les Snead continues to draft running backs over the last couple of years. I think they continue to just look for these guys that they love the same way they loved Kyron Williams. Blake Corum 2 years ago, Jarquez Hunter last year.
And they're all the same running back. Like, there's a very specific type.
Yeah. We'll see if they end up, sharing the workload or whatever, but Williams has been fantastic in the pass game as a runner. And again, offensive line-wise, I said everybody's back. It's really Coleman Shelton returns to the Rams. But they have 5 starters returning, basically. 4 were all here last year, solid group up front. So offensively, I think they look good if Stafford's healthy. I don't know what to expect from him, though, at this point.
Right. You need to get on the phone to Les and get him to make sure that Willie Lampkin is the starting center in all through preseason. Give him the reps. Get him out there.
Text him today,
let him win the job as the starting center going into the season.
I'm going to say, how's my guy? I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
I'll find out this week how he's doing. If I get a bad report, though, I will not.
Not interested in bad reports.
I will not
Only
report back.
Positive things is what I want to hear.
Defensively, man, the Rams, what a stretch they had second half of last year. The reshaping of this defensive line, it started in 2023. Aaron Donald was still there, but it was all just a youth movement all around him. He retires heading into 24, but it doesn't matter because they drafted Jared Verse in the first round, and he looks like an absolute star next to Kobe Turner, who looks like a star, next to Braden Fisk, who's got a ton of potential here. I love that they brought in Poona Ford, who's another one of always going to be on my roster guys, underrated,
add it to the list.
Stumpy run stop type who just always plays good, solid football. I love this defensive line. I love the way they got after quarterbacks down the stretch, and just revamping this D-line over the last couple of years. One of the stories, I think, of the entire NFL, because it's made the Rams not deal with this massive rebuild.
Yeah.
It's got them right back as one of the better teams in the NFC.
I mean, the power on hitting in the draft in a spectacular way is really still potent. It's unreliable, but if you do manage to do it successfully, you can change everything. And then this year, you draft Josiah Stewart as well, kind of undersized pass rusher from Michigan. That could be a real difference to this defense as well. It could be incredible. I mean, the big question is just, can they pick up where they left off, where they were destroying people throughout the playoffs? Wrecked Minnesota, ended Sam Darnold effectively as a starting quarterback there. Can they pick that up and keep doing that heading into this year?
They also have one of those, like, versus power is so difficult to stop. Josiah Stewart, who they just drafted from Michigan, has great burst off the edge. Byron Young, really good athlete off the edge. They have different types that are difficult to block as well, stylistically. The one question I had, though, up front was, they weren't big and physical from a defensive tackle perspective. I love Kobe Turner. I love Braden Fisk. They're on the undersized end, and especially Fisk. Like, those guys can get moved at the point of attack. That's where I think Poona Ford adds a ton of value there. So I like where they are there. Secondary-wise, I think they're okay. Darius Williams back again with the Rams. Starting on the outside, Akilla Witherspoon's been up and down over the last couple of years. They tried to buy low on Emmanuel Forbes last year. He's had his struggles since being a first-round pick. And they have the Camerons at safety. I think they look okay. I think, again, another team that played better. Some of their parts were better as a unit last year. But if you had to pick some question marks, I'd say it's probably corner, but I think they have the potential to be solid there as well.
Yeah, secondary, back seven generally looks weaker than the defensive line, but we saw last year in the playoffs, the defensive line is good enough that it doesn't matter, right? Like, if that defensive line gets after the quarterback the way they were doing in that run, they can paper over, like, you can have an awful lot of average play behind them, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever.
So I hate to oversimplify this, because Rams looked great down the stretch last year, but a tick below, right? I mean, they held with the Eagles in the snow game, but they felt a tick below the best teams in the NFC. But just as I've said with, say, the Bucs, who felt a tick below the best teams in the NFC, I excuse me, I think the Rams made more positive additions than maybe the Eagles or the Lions this offseason. Doesn't mean they're going to be better, but if Stafford was healthy, it felt like, hey, they might be able to compete with those best teams and make the NFC Championship and beyond. So healthy Stafford, I think that is in the range of outcomes here. And by the way, we like the West the NFC West quite a bit. We liked the AFC West. I think this NFC West has a lot of teams to be optimistic about as well. But it comes down to Stafford and this back injury, man.
Yeah, I mean, look,
over-under's 9.5 for the Rams.
They gave the Eagles the best game of anybody in that playoff run, right? They could have been the team to go to the Super Bowl instead. And if they'd gone there, I don't know if they would have lost to Kansas City the way that defensive line was playing. So this team was very close to a Super Bowl. The key pieces, guys like Matthew Stafford, like they've been to them. They've done it. They're not going to get phased like that. So the addition of Devontae Adams, I think, could and should be huge. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit because of how the Jets thing went, how the Raiders stuff was going. I think Devontae Adams can still absolutely cook, particularly when paired with a guy like Puka Nacua. I think this team is a legit contender if Matthew Stafford's back injury goes away or injuries are not a problem.
The other part about if Stafford's playing, his aggressiveness makes the ceiling high, I think, for this offense with Puka, with Devontae Adams. Drafted Terrence Ferguson in the second round at tight end with some of those additions. His aggressiveness makes it so that I think that ceiling is high for the Rams. I think if he's healthy, I'm going over.
Same.
Am I hedging now because I'm concerned about the back? And might say
no. I mean, I think again we've said it at the time when we were reasons for concern or optimism. It is fair, I think, to look at this team and say because Stafford is, at his age, dealing with injuries, et cetera, it is an asterisk, right? Like it's one that doesn't exist for other quarterbacks who, they could get injured, but right now there's no reason to think they will.
So over under 9.5?
Over.
I will go under for the Rams. Over if Stafford plays. I'll just say over. We'll say he's healthy. Over for the Rams. Two more teams. Let's go Seattle Seahawks here first. 10-7 last year. I mean, is there a bigger wild card in the NFC than the Seattle Seahawks? Just because I think there's a lot of pieces for them to be good, but then there's just Geno Smith for Sam Darnold, the wide receiver overhaul. They're just overhauled in a couple key areas, and I would say the offensive line remains a question mark heading into the season. I love what Seattle might have on the defensive side of the ball. We'll talk about that first, but Sam Darnold comes in. By all reports, they were trying to get a deal done with Geno Smith. They just got 3 good, solid starting seasons out of Geno Smith. I think that kept Seattle very competitive, right? They were a fringe playoff team that made it to the playoffs or just missed the playoffs these last couple seasons here. Now Sam Darnold comes in, coming off an incredible season. I think when it happened, I said overall it feels like a lateral move, but it's also fair to say Darnold's last season was better than any of Geno's last 3. But Geno Smith had 3 years of consistency. We've only seen Sam Darnold do it once. So it's just a big wild card here. Can they get another good year out of Sam Darnold without Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, without Kevin O'Connell, and perhaps with another questionable pass-protecting offensive line, because that ended up being the undoing for Darnold in Minnesota down the stretch last year. Yeah,
well, this is the thing, right? It's that every Darnold statement has to end with the caveat until the end, right? It's like, his season last year was better than anything we'd seen from Geno until the end. And the end like almost it undid everything. I mean, not just the Rams game, but the Lions game before that. Remember, the final weekend of the season, everything was on the line. The two 14-win teams were going head-to-head with the number 1 seed on the line, with the division on the line, with the sort of chance to prove that they were the best team out there on the line, and Darnold wilted. And that was the first instance of him wilting. And it started off, okay, and then a bad thing happened, and it was like the replacements thing, the quicksand, right? Darnold tried to do more and more and just kept sinking deeper and deeper. And then the following week, it's like, well, that might have just been a blip against the other best team in the NFL. And then the same thing happened with the Rams, and they just destroyed him, and Darnold had nothing. So now you're like, okay, it's a small sample size. The rest of the season was spectacular. You can talk yourself into it, but it means that you've just given the keys to Darnold. You've handed him a decent amount of money, albeit not, it's not like you're paying him $60 million or anything. But you're taking this guy who ended the season literally collapsing, and you're putting him behind an offensive line that may not be any better than the one he was dealing with last season. Is your coaching any better than it was last season? I mean, Clint Kubiak coming in is an interesting name to pair with him it's probably not an upgrade over Kevin O'Connell based off recent evidence. So it's a very unknown dynamic. Like, what are we going to get from Darnold?
And even if you don't break down his season into he was great and then he fell apart the last 2 games, if you look at the season in totality, which I'm doing, we have a career's worth of us making Sam Darnold jokes like, hey, the first 3 games he's really good. He just hasn't been consistent.
Yeah.
So high ends, like the inconsistent Darnold has been part of his career path. Last year he just had a much longer stretch of good play. But to be fair, we were saying the same thing about Geno Smith after the 2022 season, which was like, here's this 8-year career backup. Now he's had 1 good year starting. Let me see it again. Like, can you actually bank on that again? And then he did it, right? Relatively the same over the last 3 years, Geno Smith. So if Darnold is the same, I'm not saying 40 touchdowns, but if he's got a similar level of play, Seahawks could be really good this year. But it's Darnold coming in, and you have DK Metcalf out, and you have Tyler Lockett out. So you have turnover at receiver as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba, man, he week 7, week 6, whatever it was, absolutely turned a corner, looked like a star as well. You bring in an aging Cooper Kupp, who has not looked the same over the last couple of years. You have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's an MVP creator. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Every team he's on, the MVP quarterback is there, including Buffalo last year for a second. It's just a lot of turnover in the pass game in Seattle this year.
It's such a weird offseason because heading into the offseason, this team looked like they were extremely well positioned because effectively everything was good except the interior of the offensive line, really. And you could maybe broaden that to 4/5 of the offensive line depending on where you are in Abraham Lucas at right tackle. But let's say, for the sake of argument, just the interior. I mean, that's a pretty easy brief to head into an offseason with. Like, all you got to do is fix this one area. Okay, it's 3 players, but one area, and you're good to go. I mean, you could contend based off the rest of the roster. And then it went from that to actually now you have to find a new quarterback and a new receiver, 1 or 2, number 1 or number 2, depending on how you break down DK versus JSN. So, I mean, those are 2 of the most important things on the entire roster that weren't problems heading into the offseason, then became problems. Now, the Seahawks will argue this was beyond we couldn't do anything about it, right? Geno wanted out. There was no way of talking him off the ledge. Therefore, we had to make this move happen. Same thing with DK. I don't, whether or not that's true or not, who knows? We're not in the building. It's hard to know. But they created 2 extra problems that didn't need to be problems or didn't look like they were problems heading into the offseason. So now, like, the majority of their offseason becomes about, like, quick fill those holes. Like, let's patch the holes in the boat that have shown up out of nowhere. And then you still had to fix the interior of the offensive line. So, they then bring in a Gray Zabel in the draft. I love that as a draft pick. But it's such a weird situation because so much of the offseason was about fixing holes that didn't look like they were there before we even headed into the offseason.
And that's why I think they're such a big wild card, because Darnold did play good football last year overall. Cooper Kupp has been awesome. And if he's just that dependable, right place at the right time slot receiver, that's not the worst thing in the world next to JSN. But JSN's never, dominated without DK Metcalf. So can he be the true number 1, right? So it's just a lot of wild cards, but with guys who have played football well, right? O-line, I don't know if they fixed it yet.
Right.
I was a big fan of Christian Haynes in the 3rd round the previous year. If he gets a shot at right guard, I think he's got overpowered at times when he played last year, but I think he's a really good fit for the new system here. Zabel looks like a really good fit for the system here from a zone blocking run game perspective. I think they could be a little bit better, but it's a huge unknown on the offensive line with a rookie first rounder and then, into a center guard who just haven't played great in the NFL just yet. So I think O-line's still a question. Darnold's still a question, but they've got the pieces, the 1-2 punch of Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet looks like that could be really good, but if the line's not blocking, it might not matter. Charles Cross looked like, from a left tackle perspective, he took a big step forward, and he will be the guy that is holding it down. But the other 4 spots are question marks because Abe Lucas, after his great rookie season, has been injured or ineffective relative to what he was originally. So there's as many questions on this offense, I think, as any other team in the league, I would say. And then defensively, I've made the statement, Steelers, Texans in these previews, that they have top 5 defense potential. Throw Seattle in that mix. Top 5 defense potential with the defensive line depth that they've built, the ability to lock it down in the secondary. I love what they've done on the defensive side of the ball here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw the power of that scheme going in last year and what it was able to do to a group that was, I think, reasonably well situated from a personnel standpoint. It was really good. They've added some players to it as well. Your favorite player on the defensive side in the NFL, DeMarcus Lawrence, the new Morgan Moses.
Unbelievable addition. So
you would expect this defense to cook next year, and this is part of what I'm saying. Like, overall, this team looked really well positioned, but now their season becomes just a referendum on did they make the right call with Sam Darnold and trading away DK Metcalf.
Yeah, so D-line perspective, the great DeMarcus Lawrence, Leonard Williams coming off of his best season. I loved Byron Murphy in the first round previous year. I think he still has a ton of potential there. Even just Jonathan Hankins holding the point. So they've got a ton of bodies up front. You know, Derek Hall and his power. Uchenna Nwosu's still there as a pass rusher. Boye Mafe. I mean, that's some depth on the defensive line. Ernest Jones helped that run defense quite a bit when he came over from Tennessee at linebacker.
Yep.
Reek Woolen, another one of those wild card types because of his size and speed. He could have one of those years where you just can't throw on him. There's some reports from camp that you can't throw on him. Devin Witherspoon looks like a star. I think the other cornerback spot has some questions, but man, it's a lot of good talent on the defensive side of the ball. Plus, if we go back to Mike Macdonald, year 2 in his system, that's when the Ravens took a big jump. If we want to, use history to try to project the future here, so year 2 of a ton of talent, and then Mike Macdonald running the show there. So I think that's what's interesting about Seattle is I think their defense could be really good, and the offense is a wild card. So they're another one of those few teams we've said, no matter which way it goes, like if Darnold has another good season and the offense is good and the defense is really good and they win the division, I wouldn't be shocked. Or if they finish last, I also probably wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, jumping back to the offense for a tick. Also, this is like that backfield looks insane. Like you've got Kenneth Walker, who's amazing, phenomenal tackle breaker. Zach Charbonnet, who's a big, powerful, really impressive change of pace back. They drafted Damian Martinez, who slid an amazing amount in the draft, the running back from Miami. I really liked him as a combination. Those are 3 punishing but also pretty shifty, nifty running backs. They drafted Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami as well, dynamic potential, a pass catcher. And then Torrey Horton, one of my favorite draft picks as well. Like I'm buying any and all Torrey Horton hype in preseason and training camp. And genuinely, there is the number 3 wide receiver role is there to be won in that offense. Like right now, we assume it's going to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the MVP maker. Torrey Horton could take that job without that much happening.
Let me add a name to this because Elijah Arroyo, their second-round pick, is a tight end in name.
Sure.
And they were raving about him as an ex-receiver. When Arroyo went in the second, he was fine. A lot of people liked him at tight end as the explosive tight end in this draft. Every now and then, some teams just see something completely different and special in a player. Yeah. I don't know that Seattle's the only team that saw this, but they're raving about Arroyo.
Arroyo becomes what people thought Kyle Pitts was?
Yes, as just like a pure receiver. I mean, they seem over the moon about
I could see
Arroyo.
I mean, dude, that guy...
that is what his skill set is. I said he's one of the worst run-blocking tight ends I've seen, which is, right, so fine, put him on the outside. So
but at the Senior Bowl, I mean, you could see ex-wide receiver traits in there.
So he has a chance there as well. So again, that's a wild card. Torrey Horton, as you mentioned, he's a wild card. Cooper Kupp, wild card, as is Sam Darnold. That's the Seattle wild cards.
It's a really interesting offense now.
Yeah,
it's such an unknown because of the upheaval. And by the way, Jalen Milroe as well as like the backup quarterback /
Yes.
I mean, people talked about him as a guy who could play running back in the NFL. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that A, Jalen Milroe is forced into action if Darnold doesn't work out, or B, that they're able to find a way of getting him on the field as as an athlete with a package of plays or whatever.
Let's make our picks. So the over/under 7.5, by the way.
Yeah.
They're treating this. We said with Minnesota, we're like, man, this team's really good, but they've got this question at quarterback. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy is. Hasn't taken an NFL snap. Almost treating Sam Darnold the same way. Like there's no faith in Darnold having even a fraction of a good season compared to last year.
Yeah. I mean,
my prediction is Darnold has a similar season, like similar numbers as Geno the last few years.
Yeah. I feel
and
like
that's why I would go over the 7.5.
I don't know what you do with that Darnold season. It's so unusual where a guy looks like he's become a different player.
Even if the last 2 weeks didn't happen, you and I are like, show me one more time. Like in our nature is to do that.
Right.
Right. So if we never saw the last 2 weeks, we would still say, yeah, but no Kevin O'Connell,
but it's totally
no Justin
different.
Jefferson.
You would still have questions, of course, because, again, it would be like the Geno thing. You're like, okay, yeah, season's great, but, show me you can do it again. Of course you're going to have the questions, but it's way different than the way it ended. I mean, if it didn't end the way it did, I'm not sure he makes it out of Minnesota. Like, I think it changed their approach to the offseason. And it happened just as we had finally said, okay, it's time to stop expecting the wheels to fall off. Clearly, they're not going to, right? Like, we had spent all season waiting for the wheels to fall off, and they didn't. And then right as you finally go, okay, fine, he's actually become a different player, he goes all the way back to I'm seeing ghosts again and just collapses in on himself. I can't think of another situation in the NFL in history where that's ever happened, where a guy looks like he has completely changed as a player, and then in the course of a game, a switch flips and he goes all the way back to back in the shell, back in the hole. So number one, I honestly can't think of that ever happening before. So number two, who the hell knows what you do with that as information? Was that a blip? Was the season a blip?
What are you going to do with that information? Over under 7.5. I'm taking the over on Seattle. I'm buying Seattle here.
I'm going to take the over because I think everything around him is still pretty good. But, I mean, I get it. It's like the Minnesota thing. They're basically giving him the same question marks as they gave J.J. McCarthy.
All right, man. One team left to discuss. It's the Arizona Cardinals. Their over-unders, 8.5. Cardinals, they've playing hard these last couple of years, but offense, defense, things just seemed the roster was just not in the right spot. I think this is the best the roster's been in a while. We said a couple of years ago they should have been in full rebuild mode because they knew they didn't have Kyler Murray for most of the 2023 season. I think they spent that time loading up on draft capital, getting a little bit younger, and then this year, after their defensive line had some major issues last year from a personnel perspective, loaded up with Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell, Walter Nolan, Dalvin Tomlinson. Just so much more talent, I think, on this team. So over-unders 8.5, and was impressed with how they had played the last couple of years, right? They were the team that looked like they should have been overwhelmed on paper and was very competitive at various points, overwhelmed at other times, but overall, I would say impressive couple of years with lesser talent, and now they're more talented than they've been.
Really impressive. Jonathan Gannon may be the finest example of not judging a book by the first impression. Maybe Nick Sirianni given his opening press conference, but those are two guys who the first impression was farcical. Nick Sirianni's press conference was awful. Jonathan Gannon was the guy that goes in with the video of zoom, zoom, it was awful, ridiculous looking. And yet this has been one of the best coach teams in the NFL since he got there on both sides of the ball. They've been really, really good. And I think they've been making a lot more of the personnel they have than they should have been. But now, again, they're bridging the gap. Now they've actually added personnel to what was already a really good scheme, and we should start to see some really good stuff. I mean, we were talking about that defensive line this time a year ago, and you're like, this reads like a preseason second-string unit, right? And now it is. Now the group that was a starting group last year are all number 2 on the depth chart. They've been bumped down by all the additions that they've made, and so it should be so much better.
Let's start on the defensive side of the ball because we've done the opposite for every other team, but it's really intriguing to me because of that, right? I think they saw the weakness and attacked it with Dalvin Tomlinson coming in, going to get Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell. He's almost our age, but he could still play. There's just so much more star power and depth on that defensive line. And what's been most impressive about Jonathan Gannon and this team is the fact that they did find ways to make plays at the end of games and rush the passer, like Zaven Collins and Mac Wilson. They had Mac Wilson playing on the edge a lot. He's more of a traditional linebacker. They had Zaven Collins moving around. They've found ways to use the skill sets that they have, where Zaven Collins is not an elite pass rusher, but he's a good football player, and they just maximized his skill set. Mac Wilson, solid football player. They maximized his skill set. Now they have more overall talent on this team. So I really like the front seven. I like the way they've moved people around on the front seven these last couple of years. So I do think they just have far more flexibility. Remember, Zaven Collins was a linebacker turned edge. They have Baron Browning, who's a linebacker turned edge. They have all of these versatile type of players in the front seven. They have Buda Baker, who's plays all over the field, safety in name, but he's just overall good football player. I'm intrigued to see what they do both schematically, but also now that they have these different body types and people who can actually win one-on-ones. And then last thing I'll throw in Darius Robinson, another hybrid edge interior type of player who they got in the first round. Didn't really get to see him much last year, but different bodies, different potential. Walter Nolan, who's missing a lot of camp, but can be really disruptive. This front seven has a lot of intrigue.
And there's a lot of big bodies as well. I mean, Calais Campbell is a massive, long, problematic body type to deal with as an offensive lineman. Darius Robinson is in a similar bucket in terms of that tweener, but long, hard to block. Jordan Birch, the rookie from Oregon, is a similar, just huge. There are some massive body types to have to deal with for opposing offenses.
So, yeah, I'm intrigued by this defense. The other part, we said from a draft perspective, maybe the most boomer bust draft. People didn't like Walter Nolan from just a whatever standpoint, off field, whatever you want to call it. Now, again,
some people did.
But some people were fine.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I thought he was a top 10 caliber player. They get him in the middle of the first round. Potential's there. Will Johnson, another top 10 caliber player at corner. They get him in the second round. I was watching saw the clip from Spotlight this week.
Yeah.
He was getting talked up as having a great camp, Ari Mayrov and Spotlight. Go check it out, either on Twitter or here on YouTube, where Will Johnson's great camp was being talked up on Ari's show. So, yeah, the high-end potential of Walter Nolan and Will Johnson, I think, is through the roof, and an awesome buy low on Will Johnson given his draft stock in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they need help at corner.
Definitely. So I think the first two draft picks were very good. Walter Nolan, a potential difference maker immediately on that defensive line. Will Johnson, a guy that most people had as a first round pick, really throughout the process ends up slipping into the second round. I mean, I kind of get it based off some of his tape, but I think it's invariably seen as a phenomenal value draft pick, and history says those have some power, right? Stopping the slide of a guy that slipped beyond where people expected him to, those have a better than average chance of working out. Jordan Birch, as we mentioned before, I think is an intriguing body to throw on that defensive line as well. So their first three draft picks could be significant players to add to this team and definitely make an impact.
Garrett Williams broke out last year at corner. Will Johnson has a chance to make an impact. Have some questions about that other cornerback spot, but I just love a lot of the moves the Cardinals have made defensively, and you add that with a scheme that I think is a group that's overachieved these last couple of years. That's where all the potential comes from. Offensively, Kyler Murray back at the helm. At quarterback, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., last year's number 4 overall pick.
On the workout program.
We'll see what happens there. Trey McBride coming off of a huge breakout season as well. Offensive line mostly intact from last year, I believe. So they have a chance to be as good, if not better, to me, depending on what they get from Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 2.
Yeah, it is the X factor there. It's not like he was bad year 1, and there's all these sort of stats that Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie season looked a lot like Marvin Harrison Sr.'s if you just look at raw numbers.
Don't do it.
But as we know, that's not a particularly fair comparison these days. Number 1, extra game. Number 2, totally different football game. But so it was relatively underwhelming given the expectations and the hype around Marvin Harrison Jr. from a long time before the draft. But it's not like it was bad. And now he has shown up genuinely reworked as a body. I mean, he is physically completely different than he looked last year. Where you had this long, skinny guy that did not look particularly explosive. Now he's jacked to the gills. I mean, he looks huge now. And I don't know how much more explosive or otherwise that's made him, but he is carrying a completely different type of weight than he was carrying last year. So that's going to be fascinating to watch, because if he can become that number one wide receiver that he was supposed to be at draft time, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, the backfield is still strong with James Conner, Trey Benson. Like, this is a group that could cook. Greg Dortch is back as a dynamic underneath slot weapon. Like, that's for real if Marvin Harrison is that guy.
Zay Jones getting talked up as having a great connection right now. I have enough faith in Marvin Harrison Jr. that he's going to be good. The question is he in a draft class where Malik Neighbors is there and Brian Thomas Jr. is there and those guys look like dynamic all over the field threats? Marvin Harrison Jr. might not be the downfield threat, might not be that, short threat that can take it to the house. That's the question. I think he might have it in him though, so I'll give him another year.
But
to
also,
prove that. I think he'll be very good.
I mean, look, who knows how much of this stuff is true or not? But when he was asked, what did you do to come back into training camp jacked out of your mind? He was like, I just, ate more. Like, he wasn't like, oh yeah, I spent 6 weeks working hard in the gym and grinding, explosive. He was just like, I just started eating more. Which, I mean, if that is genuinely the case,
that's how I put weight on.
You put on a different type of weight when that happens. But if Marvin Harrison was just under eating previously, and that's why he was that kind of skinny, tall, I don't know what kind of it. Maybe genuinely there is a far more explosive athlete to be had by Marvin Harrison just taking care of himself better than he had previously.
The one thing that I think is missing,
or
on this
maybe he
offense,
was lying and he was actually working his ass off all offseason to put on a ton of weight. Who knows?
The one thing that I think is missing though is an explosive deep threat.
Yeah.
Especially for Kyler, who could throw the ball a mile, right? That's why I think we had Jalen Noel going to them. I wanted to put Noel with
everybody,
with a lot, but Arizona with Kyler, with Tennessee, with Cam Ward in particular. If they could just find a 4-3 receiver,
sure,
on the waiver wire, I would love that for this offense. There was a lot of times last year the run game looked really good. James Conner as the workhorse. They're talking about giving Trey Benson, last year's rookie last year, giving him a few more touches. I think he's tough to tackle. Connor's become one of the best dependable running backs in the NFL. And like I said, most of the line is back, including Paris Johnson at left tackle heading into year 3. Mm-hmm. Brandon Thorne was talking him up quite a bit. I think he's continued to progress and it does look like one of the better young tackles in the league right now.
Absolutely. I mean, he's on the rise. I think, there's a lot of young players ascending on this offense. It's reason for excitement.
All right, let's wrap it up with this. The Kyler discussion. The way we described him last year, remember there was a couple games where he was unbelievable. Did they beat the Lions? No. There's a couple games where he was unstoppable.
He had 2 of the best 5 graded games at PFF in the NFL last year.
Oh, it wasn't the Lions. It was the Rams game in week 2 where the dude was just unstoppable.
Yeah. Made
3 insane throws against the Dolphins a few weeks later. But in between, it wasn't always there. And so there's elements to Kyler's game where he is so special in certain weeks. It's like no one's beating this team.
Yeah.
No, and that was a Cardinals team again. That was there ever a game where they had more talent than the other team? Probably not. And you saw Kyler just straight carry that squad, but it wasn't there every single time. And we saw that early in his career. The consistency aspect of Kyler, week to week, throw for throw, the special is absolutely there. We saw him not on the same page with Marvin Harrison Jr. Forget how jacked he is, and they just he's throwing the back shoulder, Harrison's running deep, vice versa. When they're on the same page, it's dropped. That connection, they have to figure it out. But Kyler can throw the ball to all levels, can make good decisions, can make big time throws. He could be a run threat as a scrambler. He could be a run threat in the design run game. All the ingredients are there for him to be a top 10 quarterback, but I don't think we've seen top 10 quarterback play or top 8 quarterback play for a few years from him.
No, he had that one year where he was leading the NFL in big time throw rate and just spectacular numbers. And then he got hurt, obviously had the injury, came back, and he's never really been that guy again, all outside of the occasional game where he shows up and it's like, wow, he is a special athlete and capable of absolutely insane stuff. It is crazy. The him and Marvin Harrison not being on the same page thing is huge. The way Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were just the same mind when it came to back shoulder throws, one-on-one stuff on the outside. If Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray just had that last year, I mean, how many He had almost 900 yards. How many yards do you think he'd have had if they were just on the same page on those plays alone?
Yeah.
It's like you're talking about probably 1,200, maybe 1,100, let's say, to be conservative. But like 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, you're like, great, we got our guy. But because it's not, for some reason, they were completely not on the same page just on those sort of telepathic plays. It's 908 touchdowns, and now we're a little bit disappointed, and we're wondering, why is Marvin Harrison not as good as we thought we were? But, like, that's the difference between a relatively underwhelming season and a season where everyone's loving life and saying this guy's great and he can be amazing, is just those two guys on the same page on those plays. That should be fixable. Like, if they're not spending their entire offseason, working to be in concert on those plays, all you need is Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., and a Mark, right, to play corner. And that's it. Just spend the entire offseason with those three guys working that.
And then we mentioned Trey McBride and his breakout. I mean, they have a potential to, if Harrison takes a step forward, McBride looks like maybe the next, top 2 tight end, him and Brock Bowers really as the other guys get a little bit older. There's a lot of potential there in Arizona. I'm liking where they're trending. Over-under is 8.5 here for the Cardinals. Where are you going with this one? You were sneaky high on them last year, right? Relative to, they had very low expectations.
Yeah, I mean, for the same reasons. Like, you look at, and kind of similar this year, you look at the pieces and you're like, they've been a very well-coached team and they've gotten much better from a personnel standpoint. I could see this team being better than people are expecting them to be.
I'll take, go ahead. You're going to go over.
Yeah, why not? Let's go over.
I'll go over for the Cardinals. This might be the one division, if you gave me any of these 4 teams to win it, and I wouldn't be surprised. Is there another division where any of the 4 could win and you wouldn't be all that surprised?
I mean, so both Norths, you would be shocked if the 4th team won it, Chicago or the Browns. The West, you would be shocked if the Raiders won it. Yeah.
I mean, the Chiefs are there. Like, the Chiefs are the clear favorite there.
Yeah.
In the AFC West.
The East, you would be shocked.
The Bills
if
are the clear favorite. You'd be shocked if the Giants won it over the teams that they have to leapfrog.
South? The AFC South? Would you be blown away? Titans, yeah, I guess you'd be shocked if the Titans won it.
In the NFC South, I'd be shocked if the Saints
yeah.
won.
No, you're right. This might be does that just mean it's the team with the strongest 4th place side?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But literally, I think with the wild cards in Seattle, Arizona's getting better. The Rams are getting better, but they have a back injury quarterback. And the Niners, I mean, they were the clear best team over the last couple of years. They just had one bad year, and they still have a lot of that nucleus back, right? So it's up there for the most competitive division with the Norths and probably the AFC West as well.
Sure. Yeah.
There it is, man. 32 out of 32.
Now, critically, the moment you've all been waiting for, except you haven't been waiting because you don't know. If you've stuck around at this point in the video, we mentioned earlier that Kyle Shanahan's aging as head coach of the 49ers has been a lot like the aging you see in before and after pictures of presidents. So our producer, Ben Allen, has done the legwork, and he has got photographic evidence of this. Let's first throw up the before and after image of Abraham Lincoln, who, let's face it, went through some trials and tribulations as president, right? See on the left there, we've got young, fresh-faced Abe, ready to take on everything, all the challenges of the office. And then the right, you've got a grizzled old veteran that's been through some stuff, who's seen some things as president, and I think has aged quite significantly because of that. Now let's throw up Kyle Shanahan and see what running the 49ers has done to him. Again, young, fresh-faced Kyle, all suited, ready to go. On the right, we've got a grizzled old man who's seen some stuff. And that's not even the worst picture I've seen of Shanahan of looking old. But he looks like he's seen some stuff from that old, young, fresh-faced version of himself.
Yeah, he's seen some stuff.
That's a man who's been aged by the job, is what I'm saying.
I mean, next it's going to be us before and after,
I don't want a before and after of us.
Before and after we started the show.
Because before I had hair, didn't have a beard. It's a very different person. Or it's one of those boy band photographs. Either way, it's not going well.
We need you from boy band to starting the show to where you are now.
Hopefully, that's not the kind of work that Ben can do on the fly in the space of 10 seconds.
No, plus we could also just say we're done.
That's what I'm saying.
Show's over.
Wrap the show
Ben,
before you can get that done.
All right, so that's it. 32 out of 32 teams, all previewed. Appreciate everybody that's been joining us for that. Go check out the other episodes if you have not. yet. So I'm glad we got our team previews out of the way, so you guys can check those out. It's now preseason football time. Football tonight. Be sure to make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that when we go live, when Shedeur goes 6 for 20, we're gonna instantly react. When he goes 14 for 15, we'll stitch up the gold jacket. We'll be ready to react.
We're going to react. We're just going to have a measured reaction. So we will react the same as everybody else, except our reaction will be measured and reasonable and not.
In fact, we're going to pre-record.
Shedeur's getting the number one job in Cleveland based off tonight.
We're going to pre-record it so that no matter what happens, it will be a proper measured take.
Yeah.
No matter what happens. It's like, I know what you saw tonight was terrible.
But it doesn't mean anything.
But I know what you saw tonight was great, but it doesn't mean anything. There we go. This is what we're going to do. Anyway, we're going to go. We're going to go live as needed throughout the preseason action. Monday's our next show, and we will react to the biggest storylines coming out of preseason week 1. Programming notes. I think we'll be at. I believe it's 2 shows per week, still over the next couple weeks. Then we'll be moving to the official 3 shows per week because we're hitting the road. We're going to go catch a couple of joint practices. Yeah. We're going to Vegas and Circa in a couple weeks, so we have a little bit of travel. Hopefully some more behind-the-scenes type of content. So, again, be subscribed so you get everything here on the Check the Mic YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Monday morning reviewing Week 1 of the preseason.